My son thought I was just an old man dozing off on the porch in the Georgia heat. He thought he could tape a felony under the dashboard of my truck and send me to prison just to steal my estate. He didn't know I saw him through the reflection of the window. He didn't know I moved that heavy envelope to his glove box exactly 3 minutes before he drove away. And he certainly didn't know that the flashing lights in his rearview mirror 20 minutes later weren't a coincidence. They were my response. Before I tell you how my own flesh and blood tried to frame me, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach a hard lesson to someone you once carried in your arms. I am Reginald King, but everyone around here just calls me Reggie. I am 75 years old, and my hands are stained with enough grease and oil to tell you exactly who I am. I spent 40 years building a trucking logistics empire up in Detroit before I sold it all and moved down here to this quiet corner of Georgia. I live simple. I drive a 1990 Ford F-150 that rattles when it hits 50 miles per hour, and I wear the same flannel shirts I bought a decade ago. To the neighbors, I am just a retiree fixing up an old house. To my son Darius, I am a walking ATM that is taking too long to expire. Darius is 35 years old and has never worked a real day in his life. He drives a leased BMW that costs more than my first house, wears suits that shine too much, and calls himself an entrepreneur. I call him a hustler who is bad at math. He married Amber 5 years ago. She is a sharp-faced woman with blonde hair and a smile that never quite reaches her eyes. She calls me Dad to my face and that old monkey behind my back when she thinks I am deaf. I am not deaf. I am just patient. And patience is a weapon most young folks do not know how to use. It was a Tuesday afternoon, humid and heavy. I was sitting on my porch nursing a glass of iced tea, watching the heat rise off the asphalt. My truck was parked in the driveway, the hood pop open because I had been checking the spark plugs earlier. Darius had pulled up 20 minutes prior, talking loud on his phone about some venture capital deal that I knew was just code for begging for money. He walked past me with a quick wave, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, and went inside to use the bathroom, or so he said. I watched him come back out. He didn't see me sitting in the shadow of the porch overhang. He looked around the yard, nervous like a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He walked over to my truck. I stayed still. My breathing slowed down, a habit from my days in the Marines back in Vietnam. You don't move when you are scouting. You just watch. Darius opened the driver's side door of my truck. He wasn't looking at the engine. He leaned his upper body into the cab, fumbling with something under the dashboard. I saw him pull a thick brown envelope from inside his jacket. It was wrapped tight in black electrical tape. He taped it up under the steering column, deep in the wiring where a casual glance wouldn't find it. He gave it a firm pat, closed the door gently, and wiped his hands on his pants. My heart didn't break. It turned to stone. I knew what was in that package. I didn't need to open it to know it was enough weight to put a man away for 20 years. Fentanyl, coke, maybe something worse. Darius had been running with a bad crowd, borrowing money from men who don't send late notices. They send guys with baseball bats. Amber had probably convinced him that if I was out of the picture, if I was locked up in a federal penitentiary for trafficking, she could get power of attorney over my assets. She wanted the money from the sale of my company. Money they didn't know I had put into trusts and offshore accounts. They just saw the old man and the old house and assumed I was vulnerable. Darius walked back toward the porch, putting that fake smile on his face. I took a sip of my tea. The ice clinked against the glass. "Hey, Pops," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Just checking your odometer. You really need to upgrade this piece of junk. It is unsafe." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I sat up with when he had fevers, and I saw a stranger. "It gets me from point A to point B," I said, my voice raspy. "That is all I need." Darius laughed, but it was forced. "Amber and I were thinking maybe you should come over for dinner tonight. We need to talk about your living arrangements. This place is too much for you to manage alone." I nodded slowly. "Maybe. Let me think about it." Darius checked his watch, a gold Rolex that I knew was fake. "Look, I gotta run to the store real quick. My stomach is acting up. I will be back in 30 minutes and we can head to dinner together. You drive your truck, I will lead the way." He went inside the house. I heard the bathroom door lock. I stood up. My knees popped, but I moved faster than I had in years. I walked down the steps across the gravel driveway and opened my truck door. I reached under the dashboard. My fingers brushed against the cold plastic of the tape. I ripped it free. The envelope was heavy. It felt dense. I didn't open it. I didn't want my fingerprints on the inside contents. I looked at Darius's BMW parked right next to me. It was unlocked. He was arrogant like that. He thought he was untouchable in this neighborhood. I opened his passenger door. The interior smelled of expensive leather and cheap cologne. I popped the glove box. It was full of unpaid parking tickets and a stack of napkins. I shoved the envelope right in the middle of the stack, pushed it to the back, and closed the latch. I shut the door and walked back to the porch. I sat down and picked up my tea. My hand wasn't shaking. I took a long drink. 3 minutes later, the toilet flushed inside. Darius came out adjusting his belt. He looked relieved. He thought his problem was solved. He thought his father was about to become his scapegoat. Ready to roll later, he asked, jingling his keys. I looked him in the eye. I tried to find a shred of guilt, a hint of hesitation. There was nothing, just greed and impatience. Yeah, I said. I will be ready. He got into his BMW. He revved the engine, a sound he thought was powerful, but just sounded like noise to me. He backed out of the driveway, tires kicking up dust, and sped off down the county road toward the highway. I waited until his taillights disappeared around the bend. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my flip phone. I dialed 3 numbers. 911. What is your emergency? My voice changed. I didn't sound like Reggie the Marine. I sounded like Reginald, the concerned elderly neighbor. Yes, ma'am. I am on County Road 9. A black BMW just went flying past my house. He is swerving all over the road. I think the driver might be intoxicated. He almost hit a mailbox. Can you give me a description of the vehicle or a plate number? The operator asked. I gave her the plate number. I had memorized it the day he leased it. It is a black 5 Series. He is heading toward the interstate. I saw him putting something in his glove box while he was driving. Looked like he was trying to hide something. It looked dangerous. Please send someone before he hurts somebody. We have a unit in the vicinity, sir. Thank you for the call. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of the afternoon. The birds were singing in the oak trees. A squirrel ran across the fence. It was a beautiful day. I knew exactly what was happening 5 miles down the road. The Georgia State Patrol does not play games with erratic drivers, especially not on that stretch of highway. They would pull him over. He would be agitated. He would be arrogant. He would tell them he is a businessman. They would ask for his registration. He would open the glove box, and then the dogs would come. I finished my tea. I stood up and walked into my house. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the pitcher down the sink. I didn't want to be here when Amber called. I knew she would call. She was the one who probably bought the drugs. She was the architect. Darius was just the labor. I went to my bedroom and opened the small safe in the back of my closet. I took out a file. Inside were the documents my lawyer Marcus Thorne had prepared months ago. I had been suspicious of them for a long time, but I never wanted to believe they would go this far. Marcus had told me to be ready. He told me that when people get desperate, they get dangerous. I looked at the picture of my late wife on the nightstand. She would have been heartbroken to see this. But she also raised me to be a man who protects his home. And right now, the enemy wasn't in the jungle. The enemy was family. My phone rang. It was Amber. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I picked it up. Hello, I said, keeping my voice calm. Reggie, you need to come down to the police station right now. She was screaming. Her voice was high and shrill like a drill hitting metal. What? Slow down. Amber. What is going on? I asked. Darius. They arrested Darius. They say he had a brick of fentanyl in his car. He told them it was yours. He told them you put it there. I paused. I let the silence hang heavy on the line. My truck? I asked, confused. I haven't left the house, Amber. Darius was the one driving his BMW. Why would my things be in his car? Don't play dumb with me, you old fool, she hissed. The mask was off. The sweet daughter-in-law was gone. I know what you did. You are going to go down there and tell them it is yours, or I swear to God I will have you declared incompetent by morning. I will throw you in the darkest nursing home I can find and sell that house out from under you before the ink is dry on the court order. There it was. The threat. The plan B. I chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. Amber. I said, my voice dropping an octave. I don't know what you are talking about. But if Darius is in trouble with drugs, maybe you should call a lawyer. I am just an old man. I don't know anything about that life. I hung up the phone. I powered it off. I walked out to my truck. I climbed into the driver's seat. It smelled like old leather and tobacco. I turned the key and the engine roared to life. It wasn't a purr like the BMW, it was a growl. I wasn't going to the police station. Not yet. I had one stop to make first. I put the truck in gear and rolled down the driveway. 23 minutes ago, my son tried to end my life as a free man. Now his life was the one ending. But the war with Amber was just beginning. She had threatened my freedom. She had threatened my home. She made a mistake. She thought she was fighting a helpless senior citizen. She didn't know she was fighting a man who once held a logistics line open during a blizzard in '88 to keep a city fed. She didn't know she was fighting a man who had buried more secrets than she had years on this earth. I pulled onto the main road. I checked my rearview mirror. No one was following me. Good. I was headed to see Marcus Thorne. It was time to execute the contingency plan. It was time to show them that you never ever try to hijack a man who knows how to drive the truck. As I drove, I thought about the envelope. I wondered how much time Darius was looking at. Mandatory minimums in Georgia are tough. 10 years, maybe 15. He wouldn't last a week. He was soft. He needed lotion for his hands. He needed thread count sheets. Prison would eat him alive. A pang of guilt hit me sharp and sudden. He was my boy. But then I remembered the tape. I remembered the way he patted the dashboard. He was patting my coffin. He was sealing my fate without a second thought. He didn't hesitate. So why should I? I turned up the radio. Blues music filled the cab. The game was on. And Reggie King was done playing defense. The police scanner app on my phone is one of the few modern conveniences I actually like. Back in Detroit, running a fleet of 50 trucks meant you had to know where the law was, where the ice was, and where the trouble was. Old habits die hard. I had the volume turned up low, the static hissing like a snake in the quiet cab of my Ford. I was parked in the lot of an abandoned strip mall about 3 miles from the interstate on-ramp. It was a good vantage point. I could see the highway overpass, but nobody on the highway could see me. I wasn't just listening to the blues anymore. I was listening to the sound of my son's life falling apart. Dispatch came over the radio first. It was a calm female voice, the kind that doesn't get excited about anything less than a 4-alarm fire. She reported a black BMW driving erratically, weaving across lanes excessive speed. License plate Delta Kilo 905. That was him. That was Darius. He was probably driving fast because he was nervous. Or maybe he was driving fast because he thought he had gotten away with it. He thought the danger was behind him, taped under the dashboard of an old man's truck. He didn't know the danger was sitting right next to his registration papers. Then the trooper's voice cut in. He sounded young, adrenaline pumping. He had visual. He was lighting him up. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the worn headrest. I could picture it perfectly. The flashing blue lights filling the rearview mirror, the sinking feeling in the gut. Darius pulling over to the shoulder tires, crunching on the gravel. He would be sweating. He would be trying to look cool, trying to channel that fake swagger he wore like a cheap suit. But state troopers in Georgia don't care about your swagger. They care about your hands. The radio chatter picked up. Subject is agitated. Subject is refusing to exit the vehicle. Then the magic words. K9 unit requested. I took a sip from a bottle of water I kept in the door panel. It was warm, but it washed the dust out of my throat. 23 minutes. That is exactly how long it had been since he left my driveway. 23 minutes for the universe to balance the books. I heard the rest of it play out over the airwaves. The dog alerted. Probable cause. Search initiated. And then the confirmation. Officers found a large quantity of narcotics in the glove compartment. Subject in custody. My son was in handcuffs on the side of I-75, and I didn't feel a thing. No tears, no shaking. Just a cold, hard certainty that I had done what needed to be done. You don't let a rabid dog stay in the house even if you raised it from a puppy. You put it down before it bites the rest of the family. My phone rang. The screen lit up with a picture of Amber. She looked like an angel in that photo, smiling at a barbecue 3 years ago, back when I still thought she might be good for him. Back before I realized she was the one whispering poison in his ear. I cleared my throat. I let it ring 4 times. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to wonder. I answered on the 5th ring. Hello, I said. My voice was slow, confused. the voice of a 75-year-old man who just wanted to take a nap. "Reggie, what did you do? What did you do?" She wasn't crying. She was screaming. It was a primal, ugly sound. The mask of the sweet Southern belle had completely disintegrated. "Amber," I asked, "who is this? You are shouting so loud I can't understand you. It is Amber, you senile old bat." "The police just called me. Darius is arrested. They have him on the highway. They said they found a brick of fentanyl in his glove box." I paused. I let the silence stretch. I could hear her breathing on the other end, short, sharp gasps of rage. "In his glove box," I asked, keeping my tone perfectly flat. "Well, that is terrible, Amber. But why are you yelling at me? I told him those fancy cars are trouble. He told them—" She shrieked. "He told them he put it in your truck. He told them it was supposed to be under your dashboard. He is screaming that you set him up." I made a sound of confusion, a little hum of bewilderment. "My truck. Amber, honey, you are not making any sense. I am driving my truck right now. I am heading over to the hardware store to get some washers for the sink. Darius drove his BMW. Why would he put anything in my truck if he was driving his car? That boy sounds confused. Maybe he is on something. You know he has been acting strange lately." "Don't you dare play dumb with me. Reginald King. I know you saw him. I know you moved it. You think you are so smart sitting up there on your porch like a gargoyle. You ruined everything." And there it was. The confession. She didn't say, "I can't believe he did this." She said, "You ruined everything." She knew. She knew about the drugs. She knew about the frame job. She was probably the one who told him where to tape it. "Amber," I said, my voice hardening just a fraction, "I think you should calm down. If Darius is in trouble, you need to call a lawyer. Screaming at his father isn't going to get him out of handcuffs." "You listen to me, old man." Her voice dropped low. It was venomous now, a hiss. "I am not calling a lawyer for him. I am calling a lawyer for you. For me, I asked. Yes, for you. You are dangerous. You are clearly suffering from dementia. You are a danger to yourself and others. Moving narcotics. Framing your own son. That is not the behavior of a sane man. That is the behavior of a sick, confused geriatric who needs to be put away." I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles turned the color of ash. This was Plan B. They had talked about it. I had heard the whispers, but hearing it said out loud with such conviction was different. It was a declaration of war. "I am perfectly sane, Amber," I said. "Are you?" She laughed. It was a cold, jagged sound. "Who are they going to believe? A young, grieving wife and mother, or a 75-year-old man who lives alone and talks to his dead wife's picture? We have been building a file, Reggie. We have documented your memory lapses, your aggression. We have the doctor on our side." She was lying about the doctor, or maybe she wasn't. "Money buys a lot of opinions in this town. You listen to me," she continued. "I am coming over there with the papers, emergency guardianship. I am taking control of the estate to protect it from government seizure. If they think Darius was trafficking, they will try to take the assets. I need to transfer the house and the accounts to my name immediately to save them. And you are going to Green Meadows tonight. I already called them. They have a bed in the memory care unit with your name on it." Green Meadows. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the dying. A place where they sedated you at 6 p.m. and let you rot in your own filth until morning. It was a prison with floral wallpaper. "You are going to take my house?" I asked. "It is not your house anymore, Reggie. It is a family asset, and since you are clearly incompetent, I am the head of this family now. Stay where you are. If you aren't at the house in 20 minutes, I am reporting you as a missing, endangered person. The police will hunt you down, and this time they won't be polite." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. I looked at the screen. My hand was steady, but my blood was boiling. It was a heat I hadn't felt since 1968 in the Mekong Delta. It was the heat of survival. She thought she had me cornered. She thought the threat of the nursing home would make me crumble. She thought I would rush home, apologize, sign the papers, and beg for mercy. She thought I was just a scared old man who wanted to stay in his rocking chair. She forgot one thing. I was a logistician. I moved things for a living. I moved heavy things over long distances through hostile territory. And when the road gets blocked, you don't stop. You find a new route. I wasn't going home. Going home was a trap. If I went home, the police would be there not to arrest me, but to assist a concerned daughter-in-law with a mentally ill relative. It is a civil matter, they would say. They would let her take me. They would let her lock me away. And once I was behind those doors, doped up on antipsychotics I would never get out. I would be a ghost in my own life while she liquidated everything I worked 50 years to build. No. Home was off the table. I started the truck. The engine rumbled a comforting, familiar vibration. I needed allies. I needed firepower. Not guns, though I had those too. I needed legal firepower. I needed Marcus Thorne. Marcus was the son of one of my old drivers from Detroit. He had grown up to be the kind of lawyer who wore three-piece suits and smiled like a shark. He operated out of a glass building in Atlanta, but he owed me. I paid for his first semester of law school when his daddy got crushed between two trailers. Marcus was the only person on earth who knew exactly how much I was worth. He knew about the accounts in the Cayman Islands. He knew about the gold I bought in the 90s. And he hated Amber almost as much as I did. I checked my watch. Amber would be at my house in 15 minutes. When she found it empty, she would call the cops. She would play the weeping, terrified daughter-in-law. "Oh, officer, he is confused. He doesn't know where he is. Please find him before he hurts himself." I had maybe an hour before my license plate was flagged in the system as a silver alert. I pulled the truck out of the strip mall lot. I didn't head toward my house. I headed toward the county line. I needed to get out of the jurisdiction of the local deputies who played poker with Darius on Friday nights. I needed to get to the city. As I drove, I replayed the conversation. To protect the assets. That was her tell. She didn't care about Darius. She didn't ask if he had a lawyer. She didn't ask if he was scared. She immediately pivoted to the money. She saw her husband in handcuffs and saw an opportunity to seize the crown. She was going to use his arrest as the excuse to declare me incompetent and take it all. 2 birds, 1 stone. It was cold. It was calculating. And it was almost impressive. But she made a fatal error. She warned me. She gave me 20 minutes. I reached under my seat and pulled out a burner phone I kept for emergencies. Another habit from the old days. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. "Ghost," I said when the line clicked open. "Reggie." The voice on the other end was like gravel in a blender. "I thought you were retired." I said, merging onto the highway, keeping my speed exactly at the limit. "But retirement just got canceled. I need eyes on a target. Her name is Amber King. She is at my house right now. I need to know everything she does, everyone she calls, and everywhere she goes." And Ghost, "Yeah, Reggie. Start digging. I want to know who she really is. I want to know about her debts. I want to know about her boyfriends. I want to know what she looks like when the makeup comes off. Consider it done. It will cost you." "I am liquid," I said. "Just get it done." I hung up. The city skyline was appearing in the distance, gray and steel against the blue sky. I wasn't the prey running for cover. I was the hunter moving to a new blind. Amber thought she was playing chess with a checker piece. She was about to find out that the board was rigged, the pieces were mine, and I had been playing this game since before she was born. She wanted a war over the family fortune fine. I would give her a war. But I wasn't going to leave her with enough rubble to build a shack, let alone a life. I pressed the gas pedal. The old truck groaned, but it surged forward. 23 minutes had started this. The next 24 hours would finish it. I pulled my truck back into the driveway just as the sun was starting to dip low, casting long, bruised shadows across the porch. I had spent the last 2 hours with Marcus Thorne in his glass office downtown laying out the battlefield, and now I was back on my own soil. I wasn't running. Men like me don't run from our own homes. We dig in. I unlocked the front door, made a pot of coffee strong enough to strip paint, and sat down in my recliner. I knew they were coming. The vultures don't wait for the carcass to cool before they start picking at the bones. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, a silver Mercedes pulled up right behind my truck. It wasn't Amber's car. It was a rental, or maybe it belonged to the man driving it. I watched through the sheer curtains. Amber got out of the passenger side. She wasn't wearing her usual yoga pants and designer top. She was dressed in black like she was already in mourning, her face scrubbed clean of makeup to look properly devastated. The man who got out of the driver's side was a piece of work. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than my first 3 cars combined, but it fit him wrong. It was too tight across the shoulders, like it was trying to contain a frame built for breaking things, not arguing cases. He checked his reflection in the car window, smoothed back his hair, and followed Amber up the walkway. I let them knock. I waited a good 30 seconds, letting them sweat in the humidity before I shuffled to the door. I hunched my shoulders a little, let my hand tremble as I reached for the knob. If they wanted a confused old man, I would give them an Oscar-worthy performance. Reggie Amber pushed past me the second the door cracked open. She smelled like nervous sweat and expensive perfume. "Thank God you are here. We have been so worried." She threw her arms around me. It felt like being hugged by a coil of barbed wire. I stood stiff, patting her back awkwardly. "What is going on, Amber?" I asked, keeping my voice shaky. "Is Darius okay? Did they let him go?" "He is in terrible trouble, Dad." She pulled away, tears streaming down her face. It was impressive, really. She could summon waterworks on command. The judge set bail at $500,000. "They are talking about federal charges. They are talking about 20 years, Reggie." 20 years. She sobbed into a tissue. The man in the suit stepped into the foyer. He closed the door behind him. He didn't look at the family photos on the wall. He looked at the layout. He checked the exits. He wasn't a lawyer. I knew what a lawyer looked like. Marcus Thorne was a lawyer. This guy was muscle-wrapped in silk. "Mr. King," the man said, extending a hand that felt like a brick. "I am Mr. Jensen. I am a legal specialist retained by your daughter-in-law to handle this crisis. We don't have much time." I shook his hand. His grip was too firm. He was testing me. "A lawyer?" I asked, squinting at him. "You don't look like the public defender." "I am private counsel," Jensen said, his voice smooth like oil on pavement. "We specialize in high-risk asset protection and emergency bail situations. Darius is in a very precarious position. The authorities are threatening to seize everything he owns. His cars, his accounts, his business. If we don't act tonight right now, your son will come home to nothing." He walked into my living room without being invited and placed a leather briefcase on my coffee table. He snapped the latches open. The sound echoed in the quiet house like a gunshot. Amber sat next to him, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "Reggie, please. We need your help. We need to secure the assets before the state takes them. Mr. Jensen has a plan to save the house and get the money for Darius's bail, but we need you to sign off on it. It is just a formality." I lowered myself into my chair, letting my bones creak. "What kind of formality?" I asked. Jensen pulled a stack of documents from the briefcase. They were thick, stapled on blue legal paper. He slid them across the table toward me, along with a heavy gold pen. "This is a temporary transfer of deed and a limited power of attorney," Jensen said. "Essentially, you are temporarily signing the title of this property and your liquid assets over to a holding trust managed by Amber. This protects them from being seized as proceeds of a crime. Once the trial is over, everything reverts back to you. It also allows us to use the equity in this house to post the bond for Darius immediately. If we don't do this, he spends the night in general population. And Mr. King, a man like Darius, he won't do well in there." I looked at the papers. The text was small, dense. Transfer of deed. Irrevocable trust. Power of attorney. There was nothing temporary about the language I saw. I didn't need a law degree to know a hustle when I saw one. This wasn't about saving Darius. Darius was the bait. This was a robbery with a fountain pen. And Jensen. I looked at his shoes. They were Italian leather scuffed at the toes. I looked at his knuckles. There was faint scarring on his right hand. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a collector. He was the guy the loan shark sent when you stopped answering the phone. Darius must have owed money to people who didn't file lawsuits. Amber had brought the wolves right into my living room. I reached for the coffee pot I had set on the side table. My hand shook violently. The cup rattled in the saucer. "I don't know," I muttered. "This seems like a lot of paper. Shouldn't I call Marcus? He handles my taxes." "No." Amber shouted, then caught herself. She lowered her voice, reaching out to touch my knee. "No, Dad. We don't have time for that. Marcus is too slow. He is old school. Mr. Jensen knows how to work the system fast. Every minute we waste is another minute Darius is in danger. Please, do it for your son. Do it for me." Jensen tapped the paper. "Just sign right there at the X, Mr. King. We handle the rest. You won't have to lift a finger. You just go to sleep, and in the morning Darius will be home." I looked at Jensen. His eyes were dead. Shark eyes. He didn't care about Darius. He wanted the deed. He wanted the collateral. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy. I leaned forward, bringing the coffee cup with me. I pretended to struggle with the reading glasses I wasn't wearing. I can't see the line, I mumbled. It is so blurry. Right there, Jensen said, pointing a thick finger. I moved the pen toward the paper. Then I let my elbow spasm. It was a move I had perfected getting out of bad poker hands in the barracks 40 years ago. My arm jerked. The coffee cup tipped. Dark, hot liquid splashed all over the contract. It soaked into the blue paper, turning it into a brown, soggy mess. It dripped onto Jensen's expensive pants. Oh hell, Jensen jumped up, brushing at his trousers. You stupid old man. The mask slipped. For a second, the predator came out. His face twisted into a snarl. Amber gasped. Reggie? Look what you did. I sat back looking horrified. Oh my. I am so sorry. I am so clumsy these days. My hands, they just don't do what I tell them anymore. I am so sorry, Mr. Jensen. Jensen was breathing hard through his nose, trying to regain his composure. He looked at the ruined papers. He looked at me. He realized he had snapped. It is okay, he said through gritted teeth. It is just coffee. I have another copy in the car. Of course you do, I thought. Amber grabbed some napkins and started blotting the table, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. Just go get the other copy, she told Jensen. Hurry! Jensen glared at me one last time, then turned and marched toward the front door. I need to clean this up, I said, my voice trembling. I can't sign anything like this. I need my reading glasses. I think I left them in the bedroom, and a fresh shirt. I spilled on myself. Go get them, Dad, Amber said, her voice tight with impatience. Just hurry up. We are running out of time. I stood up slowly, leaning on the armrest for support. I shuffled toward the hallway that led to the back of the house. I heard the front door open and close as Jensen went to his car. Amber was on her phone, whispering furiously to someone, probably telling them the old man was falling apart. I walked down the hallway. The floorboards creaked under my boots. I passed the pictures of Darius growing up, Darius at graduation, Darius at his wedding. I didn't look at them. That boy was gone. I entered my bedroom and closed the door. I locked it. The lock was a simple push-button nothing that would stop a man like Jensen, but it would give me a second of warning. I didn't go to the nightstand for glasses. I went to the heavy oak wardrobe in the corner. I moved my old uniforms aside and knelt down. There was a false bottom in the drawer. I pried it open. Lying there on a velvet cloth was my Smith & Wesson Model 29. It was a .44 Magnum revolver, heavy cold, and beautifully maintained. I hadn't fired it in years, but I cleaned it every first Sunday of the month. It was an old friend. I picked it up. The weight was reassuring. It anchored me. I opened a box of ammunition and started feeding the rounds into the cylinder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Click, click, click. I snapped the cylinder shut. Jensen wasn't a lawyer. He was a threat. He was in my house threatening my livelihood, trying to trick me into homelessness to pay off my son's gambling debts or drug debts. He thought he was dealing with a confused geriatric who would fold under pressure. He thought he could bully his way into my life. I stood up. I caught my reflection in the mirror on the back of the door. I didn't look 75. I looked dangerous. I buttoned my flannel shirt over the grip of the gun tucked into the back of my waistband. It was bulky, but if things went the way I thought they were going to go, I wouldn't need to hide it for long. I unlocked the bedroom door. Amber thought I was coming back to sign my life away. Jensen thought he was coming back to collect a payday. I was coming back to teach them the difference between a victim and a veteran. I opened the door and walked back down the hall. My steps weren't shuffling anymore. I walked with the heel-to-toe rhythm of a man on patrol. "Did you find your glasses, Reggie?" Amber called out from the living room. "I found exactly what I needed," I whispered to the empty hallway, and then I stepped into the light. Part 4. The Discovery. I walked back into the living room, my hand resting casually near the small of my back where the cold steel of the Smith & Wesson pressed against my spine. I didn't need to draw it, not yet. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the room is the one you don't show until the very last second. Jensen was pacing by the window, checking his watch like he had a plane to catch or a debt to pay. Amber was tapping her foot a frantic rhythm on my hardwood floors. When they saw me shuffle in shirt untucked, looking like I had just woken up from a nap in a storm drain, Jensen let out a breath that sounded like a tire hissing air. "Did you find them?" Amber snapped. The sweetness was gone, replaced by the sharp edge of a woman who was watching her lottery ticket slip away. I patted my chest pockets, putting on a show. You know I looked everywhere. Under the bed, in the bathroom. I think I might have left them in the truck. Or maybe at the diner yesterday. My mind just isn't what it used to be, Amber. Everything is so foggy today. I slumped into my chair looking defeated. Jensen looked at Amber, then at me. His eyes filled with contempt. He saw a senile old man wasting his time. He didn't see the predator watching him from behind cloudy eyes. "We do not have time for this," Jensen growled. He grabbed his briefcase. "Look, Mr. King, the courts close in an hour. We can't file the paperwork today if you can't even sign your name straight. We are losing daylight." Amber looked panicked. "But Darius, he is going to spend the night in jail. He is safer in jail tonight than he is out here with creditors looking for him," Jensen said, his voice dropping to a whisper that he thought I couldn't hear. "We will come back tomorrow morning, first thing, 8 a.m. Have him ready, Amber. Get him some coffee. Get him his glasses. Whatever it takes. We get the signature, we file the deed transfer, and we get Darius out by noon." Amber glared at me, pure hatred burning in her eyes. "You better be ready tomorrow, Reggie. No more games. No more spills. You are going to save your son whether you want to or not." They stormed out. I didn't get up to walk them to the door. I listened to the heavy thud of the Mercedes doors slamming, the aggressive rev of the engine, and the crunch of gravel as they sped away. The moment the sound of their car faded, I stood up. The stoop was gone. The tremors in my hands vanished. I walked to the door and threw the deadbolt. Then I engaged the secondary lock. I had installed myself a steel bar that reinforced the frame against kick-ins. I wasn't going to be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. I needed a clear head. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket and dialed Ghost again. He picked up on the first ring. "Talk to me," Ghost said. "They just left," I said, leaning against the counter. "The lawyer isn't a lawyer. His name is Jensen, muscle in a cheap suit. He tried to get me to sign over the deed to the house and power of attorney. They are desperate, Ghost. They are moving fast." "I am running background on Amber now," Ghost said. His voice was the sound of typing keys and static. "Reggie, this girl didn't exist before 5 years ago. She popped up in Atlanta with a new social security number and a credit score that looks bought. I am digging deeper into her past aliases. But Jensen, I got a hit on him. His real name is Cole Miller. Disbarred 5 years ago for fraud and embezzlement. He has been working as a fixer for the Slavic mob in Chicago before moving south. He isn't a loan shark. He is a cleaner." A cleaner. That made sense. He wasn't here to collect a debt. He was here to strip the carcass. Find the connection, I told him. Find out how a mob fixer from Chicago met a suburban housewife in Georgia. "I need the link, Ghost. I am on it. Give me an hour." I hung up. An hour. I had time. I walked into my study. It was a small room smelling of old paper and lemon polish. I moved the heavy oak desk aside. Beneath the rug there was a floor safe, not the decoy safe in the closet where I kept a few $100 and some old tax returns. This was the real vault. I spun the dial, left, right, left. The tumblers clicked a sound as sweet as a well-tuned engine. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside were stacks of cash gold coins and the ledger of my offshore accounts. I grabbed the ledger and my tablet. I needed to see the damage. I logged into the secure portal for my account in the Caymans. It took a moment to load the little circle spinning while my heart hammered against my ribs. When the numbers came up, I felt the air leave my lungs. $50,000. A withdrawal had been made 4 weeks ago. $50,000 wired to a shell company in Delaware. I pulled up the transaction image. There it was, my signature. It was a good forgery, a damn good one. But it had a tell. The loop on the R was too tight. I learned to write in cursive in a segregated schoolhouse where penmanship was next to godliness. My R was sweeping open. This R was cramped hesitant. It was the hand of someone trying too hard. Darius. I sat back on the floor, the tablet heavy in my lap. My own son. The memory hit me then, unbidden and sharp. It was 20 years ago. Darius was 15. It was a scorching July day in the truck yard in Detroit. I had him up in the cab of my favorite rig, a Peterbilt 379. He could barely reach the pedals. He was grinning that wide, innocent grin that used to light up my whole world. "Daddy, this thing is a beast," he had shouted over the rumble of the diesel. "It is a beast, son," I had told him, resting my hand on his shoulder. "But you have to respect it. You control the power. Don't let the power control you. You keep your eyes on the road and your hands steady. You earn your miles, Darius. You don't take shortcuts." He had looked at me with such admiration then. He wanted to be like me. He wanted to be strong. When did that change? When did the boy who wanted to earn his miles turn into the man who taped fentanyl under my dashboard? It was the money. The easy money I gave him because I didn't want him to struggle like I did. I sent him to private schools. I bought him cars. I shielded him from the grit and the grime of the world that made me who I am. I thought I was giving him a leg up. Instead, I cut his legs off. And then came Amber. She saw the weakness in him. She saw a boy who needed validation, who needed to feel like a big shot without doing the work. She fed his ego. She fed his greed. She turned him against me, whispering that I was holding him back, that I was a miser, hoarding wealth that should be his. She didn't just break him. She hollowed him out and filled him with rot. I looked at the forged signature again. $50,000. That was just the test run. That was them checking to see if I was watching. And because I had been playing the role of the tired old retiree, because I let them think I was slipping, they thought they got away with it. They thought the vault was open. They didn't know I counted every penny. They didn't know I had alerts set up that went to a secure server, not my phone. I had seen the withdrawal the day it happened. I just hadn't moved yet. I wanted to see how far they would go. Now I knew. They would go all the way to prison. Or the grave. My burner phone buzzed against the floorboards. It pulled me out of the past. The past was dead. The present was a war zone. I picked it up. A message from Ghost. No text, just an image attachment. I tapped the screen. The photo downloaded. It was grainy, taken with a long-range lens through a car window, likely night vision enhanced. It showed the interior of the silver Mercedes Jensen was driving. They were parked in a lot behind a diner on the edge of town. The interior light was on. Jensen was in the driver's seat. Amber was in the passenger seat. They weren't arguing. They weren't discussing legal strategy. Amber was leaning over the center console. Her hands were tangled in Jensen's hair. They were kissing. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was the hungry, desperate kiss of two people who were celebrating a victory, or two predators sharing a kill. I stared at the image. The bile rose in my throat. Darius wasn't just the patsy for the drugs. He was the patsy for everything. His wife wasn't trying to save him. She was sleeping with the man she hired to defend him. They were going to strip my assets, let Darius rot in prison for the drugs they planted, and run off into the sunset with my life's work. Darius was sitting in a cell right now thinking his wife was fighting for him. He was thinking his father was the enemy. He didn't know he was the sacrifice. I saved the image. I closed the safe. I stood up. The sadness I felt for Darius evaporated, replaced by a cold, tactical clarity. He was a fool, and he had tried to hurt me, but he was my blood. And these two, they were parasites. I wasn't just going to beat them. I was going to obliterate them. I checked my watch. The sun was down. Darkness was my friend now. I had the gun. I had the money. I had the truth. It was time to pay a visit to the county jail. It was time to show my son exactly who he had married. And it was time to give him a choice rot in prison, protecting a woman who was selling him out, or help me burn her world to the ground. I grabbed my keys. The night was young, and I had work to do. The county jail smells like industrial bleach and human misery. It is a scent that gets into your clothes and stays there, a reminder that you have stepped out of the civilized world and into a cage. I walked through the metal detectors without blinking. I emptied my pockets into the plastic gray bin. Keys, wallet, a small digital voice recorder that looked like a car key fob. The deputy at the desk was young, maybe 22. He looked at my driver's license and then at my face. He saw an old black man with calloused hands and gray stubble. He didn't see a threat. He waved me through. I slipped the recorder back into my pocket before the metal door buzzed open. I walked down the long linoleum hallway. My boots echoed against the concrete walls. I wasn't here to bail anyone out. I wasn't here to offer comfort. I was here to perform an autopsy on my relationship with my son. I needed to know if there was anything left worth saving, or if the cancer of greed had eaten it all. They brought Darius into the visitation room. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame. The swagger was gone. The expensive suit, the gold watch, the Italian shoes, they were all bagged up in a locker somewhere. Without his armor, he looked small. He looked like the boy who used to scrape his knees playing in the driveway, crying for his mama. But when he looked up and saw me through the thick plexiglass, his eyes weren't filled with tears. They were filled with bloodshot rage. He sat down and snatched the phone from the wall. I picked up mine slowly. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. I wanted him to speak first. I wanted to see what came out of his mouth when he was cornered. "You did this," he hissed. His voice was cracked raw from screaming or crying, maybe both. "You set me up, old man. You put that brick in my car." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the stainless steel counter. I didn't raise my voice. I kept it low, steady, like a diesel engine idling. "I didn't put anything in your car, Darius. I just moved what you left in my truck. You were the one who taped a felony under my dashboard. You were the one who tried to send your 75-year-old father to federal prison." Darius slammed his fist against the counter. The guard in the corner took a step forward, hand resting on his baton. Darius flinched. He was terrified. But his fear was twisting into anger, lashing out at the only target he thought he could bully. "It was supposed to be you," he shouted, not caring who heard him. "It was supposed to be in your truck. You are old, Dad. You have lived your life. What does it matter if you do a few years? I have a future. I have a business. I have a wife. You selfish old bastard. You ruined everything." There it was, the truth, naked and ugly. He didn't deny it. He didn't say it was a mistake. He said I was selfish for not letting him frame me. He said my life was over, so I should just be disposable collateral for his ambition. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was the death of hope. I had held on to a tiny sliver of belief that maybe Amber had forced him, maybe he was coerced. But no. He believed this. He believed he was entitled to my sacrifice. "You think you have a future?" I asked. "Darius, you don't even have a present. You are sitting in a county jail with a drug trafficking charge. You are looking at 20 years minimum. I wouldn't be here if you had just died like you were supposed to." He spat the words out. "Amber said it would be easy. She said you were slipping. She said we could take the assets and you wouldn't even know what hit you. But no, you had to be the tough guy. You had to be the smart guy. Well, look where it got you. Your son is in jail. Are you happy now?" I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the key fob. I pressed a button on the side. A tiny red light blinked once and went out. I held it up to the glass so he could see it. "What is that?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "This," I said, "is my insurance." "I just recorded everything you said, Darius. You just admitted that the drugs were yours. You admitted that you conspired to plant them on me. You admitted that you and your wife planned to steal my estate." Darius went pale. The red in his eyes seemed to drain away, leaving them wide and hollow. He stared at the small black device in my hand like it was a grenade. You recorded me," he stammered. "That is illegal. You can't do that." "I am not a lawyer's son," I said, putting the recorder back in my pocket. "But I know enough about the law to know that a confession is a confession. And I know that if I hand this to the district attorney, they won't be looking at me as a suspect anymore. They will be looking at you, and they will be looking at Amber." Darius slumped in his chair. He put his head in his hands. He looked defeated. He looked like a child who had just broken a window and realized he couldn't hide the pieces. "Why?" he whispered. "Why are you doing this to me? I am your son." "Because you stopped being my son the minute you taped that package to my truck," I said. "You became a threat, and I deal with threats." He looked up, tears finally spilling over. "Dad, please, you have to help me. Amber, she is going to fix this. She hired a lawyer, Jensen. He is going to get me out. You just need to sign the house over like they asked. Please, Dad. If I stay in here, I am dead. I owe money to people who don't care about jail." I shook my head. A sad, slow movement. "Jensen isn't a lawyer, Darius. He is a cleaner for the Chicago mob. And Amber. She isn't trying to get you out." I reached into my shirt pocket. I pulled out the folded printout of the photo Ghost had sent me, the grainy image of Amber and Jensen in the Mercedes locked in a passionate kiss. I unfolded it and pressed it against the glass. Darius stared at it. He squinted. Then he recognized the profile. He recognized the car. He recognized his wife. "No," he breathed. That is not true. That is fake." "It is real," I said. "Ghost took it 2 hours ago. While you were sitting in this cell, terrified, your wife was celebrating with the man she hired to rob us. They aren't trying to bail you out, son. They are trying to strip the assets and run. They need you in here. You are the fall guy. You are the distraction." Darius touched the glass, tracing the image of his wife's face. His hand was trembling so hard his fingertips left smudges on the plexiglass. He looked like he was going to be sick. The betrayal was hitting him harder than the handcuffs. He had sold his soul for a woman who was selling him for parts. She loves me, he whispered. We were doing this for our future. She loves the money, Darius. She loves the hustle. She doesn't give a damn about you. If she did, she would be here not making out with a mob enforcer in a diner parking lot. I folded the picture and put it back in my pocket. I stood up. The metal chair scraped against the floor, a harsh final sound. I am not going to bail you out, Darius. He looked up at me, panic flooding back into his face. Dad, no. You can't leave me here. You said they are going to kill me. I said you owe money to dangerous people. And right now the safest place for you is a cell in the county jail. The cartel can't get to you in here. Jensen can't get to you in here. You are in a concrete box, and for the first time in your life you are actually safe from your own stupidity. I am leaving you here, I continued, my voice hard as iron, because out there your wife is planning to sell you to the cartel. She is going to wash her hands of you, take the money and leave you to deal with the debt collectors. In here you are just an inmate. Out there you are a dead man, walking. Dad. Wait! Darius screamed, slamming his hands against the glass. Don't go! Please, I will testify. I will tell them everything. Don't leave me. I looked at him one last time. I saw the fear. I saw the regret. But mostly I saw the consequences. He had made his bed with lies and fentanyl. Now he had to sleep in it. Sit tight, son, I said. Think about your choices. Think about the man you wanted to be, and think about the man you tried to destroy. I have work to do. I have a snake to catch. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I could hear him screaming my name, begging, crying. It tore a piece of my heart out to keep walking, but I didn't slow down. I signaled the guard. The buzzer sounded. The lock clicked. I stepped out into the hallway. The air was still stale, but it felt cleaner than the air in that visitation room. I had the confession. I had the leverage. And now I knew exactly where Darius stood. He was broken, but he was alive. Now it was time to turn my attention to the head of the snake. Amber was out there thinking she had won, thinking she was the smartest person in the room. She was about to find out that she had picked a fight with the wrong old man. I checked the load in my revolver in my mind. 6 rounds. I checked the balance in my offshore account in my head. 10 million. I had everything I needed for a war. And the first battle was about to start in my own front yard. The lights from the patrol cars washed over my front porch like a disco in hell. Red and blue spinning silently in the Georgia night. They didn't use sirens. They didn't want to spook the neighbors, or maybe they didn't want to spook the old man with the reputation for cleaning his shotgun on Sundays. I sat in my recliner watching the shadows lengthen across the floorboards. I had put the Smith & Wesson back in the safe. A gun is a tool for a specific job, and shooting a sheriff's deputy wasn't on tonight's itinerary. That would play right into her hands. That would prove I was the violent, senile lunatic she was painting me to be. I heard the heavy footsteps on the porch. The wood creaked. I knew that walk. It was Sheriff Jim Miller. We went back 40 years. I pulled his truck out of a ditch in the blizzard of '93. He ate my wife's peach cobbler every Thanksgiving for a decade. He was a good man wearing a badge that forced him to do bad things. The knock came. It was polite, but firm. Reggie. It is Jim. Open up, son. We need to talk. I stood up. I stood. My knees popped a sound like a dry twig snapping. I walked to the door and unlocked it. I didn't open the screen door. I stood behind the mesh looking out. Jim was there, his hat in his hand. He looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Behind him stood 2 younger deputies, hands resting near their holsters, looking nervous. And behind them, standing near the silver Mercedes, was Amber. She was putting on a performance worthy of Broadway. She had a handkerchief pressed to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. She wasn't wearing the black dress anymore. She had changed into a cardigan and jeans, the uniform of the concerned, exhausted caregiver. She looked at me with wide, fearful eyes, then looked at Jim as if begging him to save her from the monster. "Evening, Jim," I said. My voice was calm. I kept my hands where he could see them. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Is there a problem with the noise? I was just listening to the crickets." Jim sighed. He looked down at his boots, then up at me. His eyes were sad. It isn't the noise, Reggie. You know it isn't. We got a call. And we got some paperwork. Emergency ex parte order. He held up a sheaf of papers. I recognized the seal of the probate court. What does it say, Jim? I asked, though I already knew. I could smell the ink and the betrayal from here. It says you are in immediate danger to yourself and others. Jim said, his voice heavy. It says you have been exhibiting signs of advanced dementia, aggression, confusion. It says you tried to hurt family members. Hurt family members. I chuckled. It was a dry sound. You mean because I didn't sign my house over to a mob cleaner an hour ago? Reggie, Jim stepped closer. This isn't just Amber's word. There is a medical certificate here, signed by Dr. Evans. It says he examined you yesterday and found significant cognitive decline consistent with Alzheimer's. He recommends immediate involuntary commitment for evaluation. 72-hour hold. Dr. Evans, the family doctor, the man who treated my wife's cancer, the man I trusted. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with the precision of a loading bolt. That was where the money went. I had seen a withdrawal, but I hadn't traced the recipient yet. Amber hadn't just been shopping, she had been investing. She bought a diagnosis. $20,000, maybe more, to a doctor who probably had gambling debts of his own. It was smart. Evil, but smart. A medical opinion trumps a sheriff's gut feeling every time. I haven't seen Dr. Evans in 6 months, Jim, I said quietly. That certificate is a lie. Jim looked pained. Reggie, I don't know what to tell you. It is a court order. If I don't execute it, I lose my badge. If you don't come with us, I have to authorize my deputies to use force. And I don't want to see you on the ground, old friend. Please, don't make this a fight. I looked past him at Amber. She lowered the handkerchief for a split second. A tiny, triumphant smirk curled the corner of her lip. It was a look that said, "Checkmate, old man." She thought she had won. She thought stripping me of my freedom was the end of the game. She didn't understand that for a man like me, being underestimated is the greatest tactical advantage in the world. If I fought, I went to jail or the morgue. If I went to the psych ward. But the psych ward is just a building, and buildings have doors. Buildings have phones. Buildings have laws. I pushed the screen door open. I am not fighting you, Jim, I said. I know you are just doing your job. Amber let out a dramatic sob. Oh, thank God. Please, officer, be gentle with him. He doesn't know what he is doing. He gets so confused at night. I stepped out onto the porch. The cool air hit my face. I walked down the steps, my head held high. I wasn't shuffling now. I walked like the man who built a company from 1 truck to 50. Jim moved to handcuff me. It was procedure. Front or back, he asked quietly. Front, I said. I am not running, Jim. He clicked the cuffs on my wrists. The metal was cold. It felt like failure, but I reminded myself it was just a delay. Amber rushed forward, grabbing Jim's arm. Make sure he doesn't have any keys on him, or weapons. He hides things. He is paranoid. You have to search him. She wanted my keys. She wanted access to the house while I was locked up. She wanted to tear through my office, find the safe, find the ledger. Jim looked at her annoyed. Ma'am, step back. We know how to do our job. He patted me down. He took my wallet. He took the keys to the truck and the house from my pocket. He put them in an evidence bag. These go into personal property at the station, Jim said to Amber. You don't get them. Not until the guardianship is finalized by a judge. Amber's face fell. She hadn't counted on the bureaucracy protecting me. She thought she would get the keys handed to her right there on the lawn. But officer, I need to get his medication. I need to secure the house. The house is secured, ma'am, Jim said firmly. Nobody goes in or out until the court says so. That is the law. I caught Jim's eye. He knew. He smelled the rat even if he couldn't see it. He was giving me a lifeline. He led me to the cruiser. He opened the back door. The seat was hard plastic. It smelled of old vomit and disinfectant. Before I ducked my head to get in, I leaned close to Jim. Jim, I whispered. Yeah, Reggie, call Marcus Thorne. Tell him code red. Tell him the eagle has landed. Jim paused. He looked at me. He didn't ask what it meant. He knew Marcus. Everyone knew Marcus. And he knew that if I was calling in the sharks, this wasn't dementia. This was war. I will make the call, Jim whispered back. I slid into the back seat. The door slammed shut, sealing me in. The cage. I watched through the window as Amber stood on the lawn. She was arguing with the deputies now, probably trying to bully them into giving her the keys. She looked furious. The victory wasn't as sweet as she thought it would be. She had removed the king from the board, but she hadn't captured the castle. The cruiser engine rumbled. We rolled slowly down the driveway. I watched my house disappear into the darkness. The house I bought for my wife. The house where I raised the son who betrayed me. I wasn't scared. I was angry. And anger is fuel. They were taking me to Cedar Springs. I knew the place. It was a state-run facility on the other side of the county. It was where they put the addicts, the homeless who screamed at invisible demons, and the old folks whose families didn't want to pay for a real home. It was a holding pen. 72 hours. That was the law. 3 days. Amber thought 3 days was enough time to break me. She thought 3 days in a padded room with drooling roommates would shatter my mind and make the fake diagnosis real. She thought I would come out broken, ready to sign anything just to get a warm meal. She was wrong. 3 days was a deployment. 3 days was a mission. I leaned my head against the plexiglass divider. I closed my eyes. I started planning. I needed to survive the intake. I needed to avoid the sedatives. They would try to drug me. To calm him down, the order would say. If I took the pills, I lost. If I fought the pills, they would inject me. I had to be smarter. I had to be the model patient. I had to be invisible. The cruiser accelerated onto the highway. The same highway where my son had been arrested hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 generations of kings, both in the back of police cars on the same night. One because he was a fool, the other because he was a threat. I breathed in. I breathed out. Let them take me. Let them lock the door. They were locking themselves in with the problem. They just didn't know it yet. Amber had fired her biggest shot. She had played her ace. And I was still standing. Now it was my turn. And when Marcus Thorne got that call when the legal machine started turning, Amber was going to find out that a court order works both ways. I watched the lights of the city blur past. I wasn't Reggie the victim. I was Reginald King, and I was going undercover in my own life. The game had just moved to the next level, and I was ready to play. The smell of Cedar Springs wasn't something you could wash off. It was a cocktail of industrial disinfectant, stale urine, and the sour sweat of 100 people who had forgotten who they were. They put me in a room with a boy who couldn't have been more than 20. He spent 18 hours a day rocking back and forth on his cot, whispering to a woman who wasn't there. They called this observation. I called it a test of endurance. I had survived the jungles of Southeast Asia with dysentery and a sniper tracking my squad for 3 days. I could survive 72 hours in a room with peeling yellow paint and a roommate named Billy, who thought the floor was made of lava. The staff treated me like a piece of furniture. To them, I wasn't Reginald King, the man who built a logistics empire from a single rusted flatbed. I was just patient 492, another geriatric case dumped by a family who didn't want the burden. They spoke to me in that high-pitched, slow voice people use for toddlers and dogs. Time for yum-yums, Mr. King. Time for sleepy bye. It took every ounce of discipline I had not to snap their fingers. But I knew the rules of engagement. If I shouted, I was aggressive. If I argued, I was confused. If I fought, I was dangerous. So I became a statue. I sat on the edge of my bed, back straight, eyes forward, observing the patrol patterns of the enemy. The enemy wore scrubs and squeaky rubber shoes. They came every 4 hours with a little paper cup, chemical restraints. They wanted to sedate me. They wanted me drooling and pliable so that when the 72 hours were up, any judge in the county would take one look at me and sign the permanent commitment papers. It was a smart play. If I was doped up on Haldol, I wouldn't be able to tell my lawyer my own name, let alone the account numbers to my offshore trusts. But they were lazy. That was their weakness. They were underpaid, overworked, and bored. The evening nurse was a heavy-set woman named Brenda. She didn't look at patients. She looked at the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes until her smoke break. She came to my room at 8 o'clock sharp. Medication time. Reggie, she said, not looking up from her clipboard. She handed me a cup with 2 blue pills and a small cup of water. I took the cup. My hand trembled just enough to sell the act. I put the pills in my mouth, sliding them skillfully under my tongue, pressing them deep into the soft tissue floor of my mouth. I took a sip of water and swallowed loudly, my Adam's apple bobbing. Brenda glanced at me. Open up. I opened my mouth and lifted my tongue just halfway. A rookie mistake would be to lift it all the way. I gave her a quick flash of the throat. She didn't have a flashlight. She didn't care. She just wanted to check the box. Good boy, she muttered, marking her sheet. She walked out, the heavy magnetic lock clicking shut behind her. I waited 10 seconds. I counted the footsteps fading down the hall. Then I moved. I spat the bitter pills into my palm. I walked to the small sink in the corner, crushed them into powder with my thumb, and washed them down the drain with cold water. I did this 3 times a day. By the second day, while the other patients were shuffling around like zombies, dragging their feet and staring at the television with dead eyes, my mind was razor sharp. I was hungry, I was tired, and my back ached from the thin mattress, but I was clear. I was gathering intel. I noted the shift changes. I noted which orderlies were strong and which were just collecting a check. And I waited for the visitor I knew would come. She arrived on the afternoon of the second day. The orderly opened the door and let Amber in. She wasn't wearing her grieving daughter costume today. She was wearing a sharp blazer and designer jeans, looking like a real estate agent closing a deal. She walked in, wrinkling her nose at the smell of the room. She looked at Billy rocking in the corner, then she looked at me. She pulled the single plastic chair to the center of the room and sat down, crossing her legs. She smiled. It was the smile of a hunter looking at a trapped animal. "Hey, Dad," she whispered. Her voice was soft, intimate, the kind of voice you use to tell a secret. "You look terrible. They aren't treating you very well in here, are they?" I sat on the bed, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just looked at her. I looked at the way her makeup tried to hide the stress lines around her eyes. I looked at the nervous tick in her left hand. She was winning, but she was scared. She was wondering why the victory didn't feel secure yet. "It doesn't have to be like this," she continued, leaning forward. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't the thick stack from the fake lawyer. It was a single page. Simple. "I spoke to the doctors. They say you are deteriorating fast. They say you might never leave. But I can help you. I have influence here." She tapped the paper on her knee. "Sign this, Reggie. It is a voluntary transfer of the property deed. Just the house. You sign the house over to Darius and me, and I will tell the doctors that we found a private facility for you, a nice one, with a garden, better food. You can live out your days watching TV and sleeping in a real bed. Or," she gestured to the room, to the peeling paint, to Billy muttering about the spiders in his veins, "or you stay here. The state takes over. They will declare you incompetent by Friday. They will liquidate your assets to pay for your care in this hellhole for the next 10 years. And you will die in this room, Reggie. Alone. Forgotten. Smelling like piss and bleach." She waited for me to break. She waited for the fear to fill my eyes. She wanted me to beg. She wanted me to ask about Darius. She wanted me to ask for mercy. I gave her nothing. I kept my face as still as a stone carving. I breathed in. I breathed out. I focused on a spot on her forehead. The silence in the room grew heavy. It expanded, filling the space between us. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy, judgmental silence. It was the silence of a judge looking at a criminal. Amber shifted in her chair. Her smile faltered. "Say something, damn it," she hissed, her voice rising. "Don't look at me like that. You did this to yourself. You tried to frame my husband. You are the villain here, old man." I didn't move. I didn't blink. Her face flushed red. The control was slipping. She stood up, knocking the chair back. "You think you are tough?" she spat, looming over me. "You are nothing. You are a relic. You are a senile old fool who forgot his place. I am going to bury you, Reggie. I am going to take every dime you hid. I am going to find that ledger. I am going to tear that house apart until I find where you keep the gold. And when I am done, you won't even have a gravestone." She was screaming now. The orderly looked through the observation window, but he didn't come in. He probably thought I was having an episode. He didn't see that the crazy one was the woman in the blazer. I watched her unravel. It was valuable intelligence. She mentioned the ledger. She mentioned the gold. That meant she hadn't found them yet. The safe was still secure. The game was still active. She grabbed her purse, realizing she wasn't going to get a signature today. She was shaking with rage. She wanted a fight, and I denied her the satisfaction. "Rot here," she snarled. "I will be back on Friday with the court order, and then I won't need your signature. I will just take it." She stormed out. The magnetic lock slammed shut with a heavy thud. Billy stopped rocking for a second. "She is a witch," he whispered. "Yeah, Billy," I said softly, the first words I had spoken in 24 hours. "She is. But witches burn." I went back to waiting. The next 24 hours were the hardest. The withdrawal from caffeine gave me a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. The food was inedible slop. I spent the time doing isometric exercises in my bed, keeping my muscles tense and ready. I replayed the layout of my finances in my head. I ran scenarios. What if Marcus didn't get the message? What if Jim Miller got scared and didn't make the call? What if Amber found the safe? Doubt is a poison. It seeps in when you are stationary. I pushed it away. Marcus Thorne was a shark, and sharks smell blood in the water. He would come. Friday morning arrived. The 72 hours were up at 10:00 a.m. This was the critical window. If they didn't release me, they had to file for a long-term hold. That meant a hearing. That meant a judge. Amber would be there with her fake doctors and her forged affidavits. At 9:45 a.m., the door to the ward opened. It wasn't the nurse. It wasn't an orderly. It was Dr. Evans, the man who sold me out for a check. He was wearing a white coat and looking important, flanked by 2 large security guards. He held a clipboard. "Mr. King," he said, his voice oily and fake. "It is time for your evaluation hearing. We are going to move you to the secure wing for transport to the courthouse." This was it. They were moving me. If I got on that transport bus, I was going into the system. I stood up. I wasn't going to make it easy. "I am not going anywhere with you, Evans," I said, my voice raspy but strong. "You are a liar and a thief." Evans sighed. "Restrain him. He is agitated." The guard stepped forward. I tensed. I knew how to hurt them. I knew how to break a knee with a stomp. I knew how to crush a windpipe, but if I did that, I went to prison for assault. I had to hold the line. Just as the first guard reached for my arm, the double doors at the end of the hallway burst open. It wasn't a kick. It was a shove of authority. 3 men walked in. The man in the lead was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Dr. Evans made in a year. He was 6'3", black, with a shaved head and a briefcase that looked like a weapon. Marcus Thorne. Behind him were 2 men in dark suits with earpieces. Federal marshals. "Step away from my client!" Marcus's voice boomed down the hallway. It wasn't a request. It was a command from God. Dr. Evans froze. "Who are you? You can't be in here. This is a restricted area." Marcus didn't slow down. He walked right up to Evans, invading his personal space, towering over him. He shoved a folded paper into Evans's chest. "I am Marcus Thorne. That is a writ of habeas corpus signed by a federal judge 20 minutes ago. And this," he handed him a second paper, "is a notice of intent to sue you, this facility, and the county for false imprisonment, medical malpractice, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Evans looked at the papers. His hands started to shake. But we have a court order. He is dangerous. He has dementia. The only thing he has is a better lawyer than you," Marcus growled. "You have exactly 3 minutes to process his release paperwork and return his personal effects, or these 2 gentlemen behind me will arrest you for obstruction of a federal court order. Tick-tock, doctor." Evans looked at the marshals. They didn't smile. They just stared. The color drained from Evans' face. He looked like a man who just realized he bet his career on a losing horse. "Release him," Evans squeaked to the guards. Marcus turned to me. He didn't smile. He gave me a sharp nod. A soldier greeting a commander. "Ready to go, Reggie?" he asked. "I have been ready for 3 days," I said. "They brought me my clothes." I changed out of the hospital gown, putting on my flannel shirt and my jeans. They felt like armor. I laced up my boots. I walked out of that room. I didn't say goodbye to Billy. I didn't look at the nurses. I walked down the hallway, flanked by my legal team. We pushed through the double doors and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom, and it tasted like revenge. "Where to?" Marcus asked as we reached his black Lincoln Navigator. "My house," I said. "I have a safe to check." "And then what?" "Then we go hunting," I said. "Amber thinks she is going to court to bury me. I think we should show up early and help her dig the hole." The leather seats of Marcus Thorne's Lincoln Navigator felt like a throne compared to the plastic mattress at Cedar Springs. The air conditioning hummed, filtering out the smell of the asylum, replacing it with the scent of new car and expensive cologne. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on a thick manila envelope sitting on the center console. We were cruising down the interstate, heading back toward the county line, leaving the city and the doctors behind us. But we weren't leaving the war. We were just redeploying. Marcus tapped the envelope with his index finger. It was a rhythmic, heavy sound. "We have her, Reggie," he said, his voice deep and satisfied. "My investigator cracked the doctor's financials this morning while you were putting on your boots. A wire transfer for $20,000 hit Dr. Evans' personal account 3 days ago. It came from a shell corporation called Blue Horizon Consulting. Guess who the registered agent is?" I looked out the window at the passing pine trees. "Amber King," I said. "Amber King," Marcus confirmed. "She didn't even try to hide it well. She thought you would be locked up and medicated before anyone looked close enough. That is a direct line of bribery, Reggie. Medical malpractice, fraud, conspiracy. We can file charges today. We can have her in handcuffs by dinner time. We can take the house back, freeze her assets, and sue Dr. Evans until he is selling pencils on the corner." I listened to him. It sounded good. It sounded like justice. It sounded like what a reasonable man would do. But I wasn't feeling reasonable. I was feeling surgical. If we arrested her now, she would lawyer up. She would cry to a jury. She would play the victim, claiming she was just a desperate wife trying to help a sick father-in-law, and the money was a consulting fee for expedited care. She might walk, or she might get a slap on the wrist. And Darius. He was still sitting in jail, thinking she was his savior. "No," I said. My voice was rough like gravel tumbling in a mixer. "Not yet." Marcus glanced at me, his eyebrow arching. "Not yet, Reggie. She tried to lobotomize you. She paid a doctor to erase your civil rights. You want to let her walk around free? I don't want to just beat her in court, Marcus. I want to break her. I want to expose her so thoroughly that even her own mother won't take her phone calls. I want Darius to see it. I want the whole town to see it. If we arrest her now, it is just a legal dispute. If we wait, if we give her enough rope, she will hang herself on live stream." Marcus sighed, but a small smile played on his lips. He knew me. He knew how I operated back in Detroit. You never strike the enemy when they are expecting it. You strike when they think they have won. "What is the play?" he asked. "I need 24 hours, I said. "Drop me at the house. Don't file the suit yet. Let Dr. Evans sweat. Let Amber think the plan worked, or at least that she has time to regroup. She is desperate, Marcus. She spent money she didn't have to bribe that doctor. She needs a big payday, and she needs it fast." We pulled into my driveway 10 minutes later. The house looked the same, but it felt different. It felt violated. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy with secrets. My truck was still parked where I left it, a testament to the chaos of the last few days. Marcus idled the engine. "You sure about this, Reggie? I can leave a security detail." I shook my head. "If she sees security, she won't make a move. I need her to think I am vulnerable. I need her to think I am back home confused and unprotected. Go back to the city, Marcus. Be ready to move when I give the signal." He handed me the envelope with the evidence. "Stay dangerous, old man." "Always," I said. I watched him drive away. Then I turned to my house. I unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale. I walked through the rooms, checking for signs of entry. Nothing was broken, but things had been moved. A drawer in the hallway table was slightly ajar. The rug in the living room was kicked up at the corner. She had been here. While I was in the psych ward, Amber had come looking. She wasn't looking for clothes or food. She was looking for the ledger. She was looking for the gold. There was a rumor back in Detroit, a story that followed me down to Georgia. People said that when I sold the trucking company in '99, I didn't trust the banks with all of it. They said old Reggie King converted $1 million into gold Krugerrands and buried them somewhere on his property. It was the kind of story men tell in barbershops. I never confirmed it, and I never denied it. It was a useful shield. It made people think I was eccentric. It made them think the money was inaccessible. Amber believed the rumor. I had seen her eyes wandering to the backyard during barbecues. I had seen her pacing off the distance from the old oak tree to the shed. She thought the fortune was in the dirt. She was wrong. The fortune was in diversified international bonds and high-yield accounts protected by encryption keys she couldn't even pronounce. But greed makes people stupid, and greed makes people believe in pirate treasure. I went into the kitchen. I looked up at the corner of the ceiling near the smoke detector. There was a tiny black dot there that hadn't been there a month ago. A camera. She had bugged my house. She wanted to monitor the senile old man. She wanted to know if I remembered where the gold was. Perfect. I picked up the landline telephone. I knew she had remote access to the call logs, or maybe she was listening in real time through that little black dot. I dialed a number. It wasn't a real estate agent. It was Ghost, my investigator. But to Amber, it would sound like the opportunity of a lifetime. I waited for Ghost to pick up. "Hello," Ghost said. "Hey, it is Reggie," I said, pitching my voice loud and a little shaky like an old man trying to sound important. "Look, I need to talk to you about that back 40 acres behind the house." "Yeah, the wooded lot." I paused, letting the silence hang. "I need cash," I continued. "This whole mess with Darius, the lawyers, the doctors, it is expensive. I have decided to dig it up." Ghost knew the script. We had rehearsed this via text on the drive over. "Dig it up," Ghost asked, playing the part of a skeptical buyer. "You mean the stash?" "Yeah, the stash," I said, glancing at the camera in the corner. "I can't access my bank accounts right now because of this mess with the court, but I have the box in the backyard. I am going to dig it up tonight. I want to sell the coins. All of them. Cash transaction. Can you meet me here tomorrow morning with a buyer?" Ghost whistled. "That is a lot of gold, Reggie." "You sure you remember where it is?" "I never forget where I put my retirement, son," I said, tapping the counter. "It is under the floorboards of the old tool shed, 3 feet down. I am going out there tonight with a shovel. I want it out of the ground before Amber tries to pull another stunt. I am going to liquidate it and leave town." I hung up the phone. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I stood there for a moment, letting the words sink into the digital ears of the woman watching me. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand trembling just enough to look convincing. Then I shuffled out of the kitchen, heading toward the back door, stopping to grab a heavy shovel from the mudroom. I walked out into the backyard, letting the screen door slam. I knew exactly what was happening on the other side of town. Amber was watching. She was listening. She had just heard the magic words. Gold. Under the floorboards. Tonight. Leave town. Panic would be setting in. If I dug it up and left, she got nothing. If she waited for the courts, I might disappear with the cash. She had to act. She had to intercept the asset before it turned into liquid cash and vanished. And she couldn't do it alone. She needed muscle. She needed someone who didn't mind getting their hands dirty. She needed Jensen. I walked to the shed. It was a rickety wooden structure about 50 yards from the house, surrounded by tall grass and shadows. I opened the door and stepped inside. It smelled of gasoline and rust. There was no gold under the floorboards, just dirt and worms. But I staged the scene. I moved a few heavy boxes. I dragged the shovel across the wooden planks, making noise. Then I went back to the house, turned off the kitchen lights, and went to my study. I pulled up the feed from my own hidden security cameras, the ones Amber didn't know about. The ones Marcus had installed while I was in the psych ward, high-definition night vision with audio that could pick up a whisper at 50 feet. I waited. 30 minutes later, my burner phone buzzed. It was an intercept from Ghost. He had cloned Amber's phone data earlier that day. It was a recording of a call made 5 minutes ago. I pressed play. Amber's voice was breathless, frantic. "Jensen, you need to get over here. Now." Jensen's voice was deep annoyed. "Amber, I am in the middle of a poker game." "What is it?" "He is digging it up," Amber hissed. "The old fool is digging up the gold tonight. He is going to sell it tomorrow morning and disappear. We have to stop him. We have to get that box, Jensen. It is millions, millions in untraceable coins." Jensen's tone changed instantly. The annoyance vanished, replaced by greed. "Where is it in the shed out back? He just told his buyer he is digging it up. Listen to me, Jensen. We go in tonight, we scare him off, or we knock him out. I don't care. We take the gold and then we burn the shed. We make it look like an accident. He is old. He is confused. Nobody will question it if he starts a fire trying to find his treasure." There was a pause. Then Jensen spoke, his voice cold and lethal. "I will be there in 20 minutes. Get the car. Bring a crowbar." And Amber, "Yeah, if he gets in the way, we finish this. Tonight." The recording ended. I sat back in my chair. The trap was sprung. They were coming. Not to serve papers, not to argue. They were coming to rob me, burn my property, and likely kill me in the process. And they were going to do it all while I live-streamed it to the world. I checked the shotgun leaning against my desk. It was loaded with rock salt and bean bags. I wasn't going to kill them. That was too easy. I was going to make them famous. I opened my laptop and logged into the community Facebook page. 5,000 members. Neighbors, church friends, the mayor, the sheriff. I set up the stream titled Thieves in the Night. I linked it to the cameras in the shed and the backyard. Then I poured a fresh cup of coffee, turned off the study lamp, and settled into the darkness to wait. The cat was ready, the mice were on their way, and they were running straight into the jaws of the trap. The darkness in my study wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with the kind of silence you only find right before a storm breaks. I sat in my leather chair, the one with the cracked armrest that molded perfectly to my elbow, and I waited. My breathing was slow, rhythmic, a metronome counting down the seconds to their destruction. Across my lap lay the Remington 870. It was cold and heavy, a comfort in a world that had gone soft. I ran my thumb over the safety, not because I needed to check it, but because the muscle memory was soothing. I checked the laptop screen glowing dimly on the desk. The time was 2:14 in the morning. The neighborhood was asleep. The crickets were singing their nightly chorus, oblivious to the fact that predators were moving through the tall grass. On the monitor, the grainy black and white feed from the backyard camera showed nothing but shadows and the outline of the old tool shed. It looked peaceful. It looked like any other night in Georgia. Then a shadow detached itself from the fence line. It was followed by another. They moved with the jerky, nervous energy of amateurs. I leaned forward, the leather of the chair creaking softly. There they were. Jensen was in the lead, carrying a heavy crowbar and a flashlight he hadn't turned on yet. He was moving surprisingly well for a man in a cheap suit, but he was loud. I could hear the crunch of his shoes on the dry leaves through the external microphone. Amber was right behind him, looking around wildly, her head whipping back and forth like a bird sensing a hawk. I watched them approach the shed. They didn't go for the house. They went straight for the bait. Amber pointed at the door, whispering something I couldn't quite catch, but the body language was clear. Get in there. Get the money. Jensen jammed the crowbar into the padlock hasp of the shed. He didn't finesse it. He leaned his weight into it, grunting. There was a loud crack as wood splintered. In the silence of the night, it sounded like a gunshot. I didn't move. Not yet. Let them commit. Let them get their hands dirty. They disappeared inside the shed. I switched the camera view to the interior feed. The infrared camera mounted in the rafters painted them in ghostly white and gray. Jensen was tearing up the floorboards I had loosened earlier. He was throwing boxes aside, tossing my tools like they were garbage. Amber was standing over him, holding a small penlight, her face twisted in a mask of pure greed. Dig deeper. Her voice came through the speakers, tinny but clear. He said 3 feet down, I am digging. Damn it, Jensen snarled, shoveling dirt that I had loosened hours ago. This ground is hard. Are you sure? He said. Here, I heard him, she hissed. He said under the floorboards, stop complaining and find the box. They were sweating. They were frantic. They were digging a hole to nowhere, looking for a treasure that didn't exist. It was time. I minimized the camera window and opened the browser. I was already logged into the Oak Haven Community Watch Facebook page. It had 5,300 members. Everyone from the mayor to the lady who runs the bake sale was on there. Usually it was used for complaining about stray dogs or fireworks. Tonight it was going to host the most popular reality show in county history. I clicked the button that said, Go Live. I titled the stream Thieves in My Backyard, Live. I selected the feed from the external camera pointing right at the shed door and the internal camera showing them digging. The screen flickered and then the red live indicator appeared in the corner. 0 viewers, then 5, then 12. People are always awake at 2 a.m. Insomniacs, nursing mothers, shift workers. I picked up the microphone connected to the PA system I had rigged up hours ago. It was hooked to a speaker mounted under the eaves of the back porch, pointing directly at the shed. I also reached for the remote control for the floodlights. I had positioned my F-150 in the side yard earlier, angling it so the high beams were aimed right at the shed door. I had also rigged up 2 halogen work lights on the porch railing. I waited until the viewer count hit 50. Showtime, I whispered. I hit the lights. The backyard exploded into brilliance. The truck's high beams cut through the darkness like lasers, illuminating the swirling dust and the moths. The halogen work lights flooded the area with a stark, blinding white glare. It was brighter than noon. On the monitor, I saw Jensen and Amber freeze. They looked like cockroaches when you flip the kitchen switch. They threw their hands up to shield their eyes, blinded by the sudden assault of light. I keyed the microphone. My voice boomed across the yard, amplified and distorted just enough to sound like the voice of God. "Smile, Amber. You are on TV." Jensen dropped the shovel. He reached for his waistband, a reflex. He was carrying. I knew it. But he couldn't see anything. He was staring into a wall of light. Amber screamed. It was a high, thin sound of pure terror. "Reggie." "Good evening, neighbors," I said into the mic, watching the viewer count climb to 200. "I hope I didn't wake you. I just wanted you all to meet the people currently breaking into my shed. That is my daughter-in-law, Amber King, and her friend, Mr. Jensen." Jensen spun around, trying to find the source of the voice, trying to find a target. But I was inside behind brick and glass and darkness. "We are live, folks." I continued, my voice calm, conversational. 500 of your neighbors are watching right now, Amber. Say hello to Mrs. Higgins from down the street. Say hello to Sheriff Miller. I see he just tuned in. Amber looked at the empty air, her eyes wide and white in the glare. She realized it wasn't just lights. She realized the trap wasn't physical, it was social, it was reputational. "Reggie, stop!" she shrieked, shielding her face with her purse. "It is not what it looks like." "It looks like burglary," I said. "It looks like you are digging for gold that isn't there. It looks like you tried to have me committed so you could rob me, and when that failed, you decided to do it the old-fashioned way." Jensen realized the situation was foobar. He grabbed Amber's arm. "Let's go. Move, don't run now," I taunted them. "I have coffee. We can discuss the deed transfer. Or maybe you want to explain to the nice people watching why you paid a doctor $20,000 to lie about my health." Jensen didn't wait. He bolted. He shoved Amber toward the gate, abandoning the tools, abandoning the dignity, abandoning the plan. They stumbled out of the shed, tripping over the loose dirt, squinting against the blinding lights. I watched on the screen as the comments started rolling in faster than I could read them. "Is that Amber? The one who runs the PTA? OMG, she is robbing him. Call the cops, I am calling 911 right now. Look at the guy with her, that is not her husband." It was a cascade of judgment. It was the end of her life in this town. She wasn't just a thief. She was a spectacle. They reached the back gate. Jensen kicked it open, splintering the wood I had repaired last summer. They scrambled through, slipping on the wet grass of the alleyway. I didn't chase them. I didn't fire a shot. I didn't need to. The shotgun stayed on my lap, cold and unused. The digital weapon had done more damage than buckshot ever could. I had destroyed their anonymity. I had destroyed their narrative. I watched them disappear into the darkness of the alley, two shadows running from the light. I keyed the mic one last time. "Run, Amber," I said, my voice echoing off the trees. "But you can't run fast enough. Everybody knows your face now." I sat back and watched the stream. The viewer count was over 1,000. The shares were skyrocketing. The video would be everywhere by morning. The police were already commenting on the feed, saying units were en route. I turned off the floodlights, plunging the yard back into darkness. The silence returned, but it felt different now. It was the silence of a battlefield after the winning shot has been fired. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "I am watching the stream, Reggie," he texted. "That was brutal. Remind me never to play poker with you." I typed back a single word: checkmate. I stood up and walked to the window. I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. They were coming for the thieves, but the thieves were gone. It didn't matter. The hunt was over. The scavenging had begun. Amber and Jensen were running scared, but they had nowhere to go. Their faces were burning up the local internet. Every gas station, every motel, every neighbor would recognize them. They were radioactive. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the coffee into a travel mug. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I had a statement to give to the police. I had a mess to clean up in the shed. And I had to prepare for the final act. Because a rat doesn't stop biting just because you shine a light on it. It gets desperate. And desperate rats are the most dangerous kind. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter black and perfect. The night was mine. And tomorrow the world would belong to the man who held the camera. The sun rose over Oakhaven, but it didn't bring any warmth to the King household. It just illuminated the wreckage of the night before. My yard was a crime scene of broken wood and trampled grass, but the real destruction was invisible. It was digital. The video of Amber and Jensen fleeing my shed like rats in a pantry had hit 10,000 views by breakfast. The comments section wasn't just a gossip column anymore. It was a jury. The entire town knew what they looked like. The entire town knew what they were. I sat in my kitchen nursing a mug of black coffee, watching the phone on the wall. I knew it would ring. Darius was in county lockup, but news travels faster through jail bars than it does through fiber optic cables. Inmates have tablets now. They have TVs. And nothing is more entertaining to a cell block than watching a new guy's wife running around in the dark with another man. The phone rang at 8:15. It was a collect call from the detention center. I accepted the charges. "Hello, Darius?" I said. "Dad, is it true? Is it real?" He was screaming so loud the distortion crackled in my ear. He sounded like an animal caught in a trap chewing its own leg off. "Is what true, son?" I asked, taking a slow sip of coffee. "The video. The guys in here, they are laughing at me. They showed me the phone. Amber and that guy Jensen. They were at the house. At 2 a.m. They broke into the shed, Darius," I said calmly. "They were looking for the gold. They had a crowbar, and they looked pretty comfortable together, didn't they? Like they had done this before." I heard a sound on the other end that might have been a sob or a punch hitting a concrete wall. She told me she was working with him on my case. He howled. She told me he was the best lawyer in the state. She said he was expensive but worth it. "He isn't a lawyer," I said. "He is a cleaner for the mob. And your wife, she isn't working on your case. She is working on your obituary. She left you in there to rot while she tried to loot the estate. She thought I was senile. She thought I was helpless. She thought she could take the money and run off with her boyfriend while you took the fall for the drugs." "I am going to kill her," Darius screamed. "When I get out of here, I am going to kill her." "You aren't getting out," I said, my voice dropping to that low register that used to make truckers stand up straighter. "And you aren't killing anyone. You are going to sit there and realize that the only person who hasn't lied to you is the father you tried to frame." I hung up. I didn't need to hear his apologies. They were worthless currency. He was broken. The illusion of his perfect marriage, his perfect life, it was all ash now. He was just a man in a cage realizing he had handed the key to his executioner. But Darius wasn't the only one feeling the heat. My burner phone buzzed. It was Ghost. "Turn on the local news, Reggie." Channel 5. I walked to the living room and flipped on the TV. There was a reporter standing outside a sleek office building downtown. It was the marketing firm where Amber worked as a vice president, or used to work. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Local executive fired amidst viral burglary scandal." The reporter was breathless. Sources confirmed that Amber King has been terminated effective immediately from her position following the circulation of a disturbing video involving an attempted break-in at the home of a local senior citizen. The company has issued a statement condemning the behavior and distancing themselves from Ms. King. I watched as the camera panned to the parking lot. Security guards were escorting Amber to her car. She was holding a box of personal items, shielding her face with a folder. She looked small. She looked frantic. People were shouting at her from the sidewalk. Neighbors, strangers. They recognized the woman who tried to rob an old man. She got into her car and slammed the door. She pulled out her phone and started screaming at it. I could read her lips even through the grainy footage. She was screaming Darius's name. She was blaming him. It was always someone else's fault. It was Darius's fault for getting caught. It was my fault for not dying. It was the world's fault for not giving her what she wanted. She was toxic. And now she was radioactive. No one would hire her. No one would lend her money. She was backed into a corner, and she had Jensen breathing down her neck for a payday that didn't exist. I turned off the TV. It was satisfying, but it wasn't the end. Humiliation is a punishment, but prison is a solution. I went to my bedroom and put on my Sunday suit. It was a dark navy wool, double-breasted, old-fashioned, but immaculate. I shined my shoes until I could see the reflection of a man who meant business. I grabbed the manila envelope Marcus had given me, and I added a few documents from my own safe. The ledger from my offshore accounts, the printouts of the shell companies Amber had set up, the connection between Jensen and the money laundering operation in Chicago. I walked out to the truck. It was time to go downtown, not to Marcus's office, to the district attorney's office. I parked in the visitor lot and walked past the metal detectors with the envelope tucked under my arm. I didn't have an appointment, but when you have the kind of evidence I had, doors tend to open. I told the receptionist I had information regarding the Darius King case and a corruption ring involving the medical and legal professions. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in a leather chair across from District Attorney Helen Vance. She was a sharp woman, steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too many lies. She looked at the file I slid across her desk. She opened it. She read the first page, then the second. She stopped, looked up at me, and then leaned back in her chair. "Mr. King," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "This is extensive. You have banking records linking a disbarred lawyer to a local marketing executive. You have evidence of medical bribery. You have a timeline of a conspiracy to defraud a senior citizen. Where did you get this?" "I have resources," I said, "and I have a lot of time on my hands." She tapped a photo of Jensen. "We have been trying to pin something on Cole Miller for 2 years. He is slippery. He moves money through so many layers of shell companies we can never find the source. But this," she pointed to a spreadsheet Ghost had compiled, "this connects him directly to Amber King's accounts. And if what you are saying about the drugs in your son's car is true—" "It is true," I said. "My son is a fool, Mrs. Vance. He is weak. He let his wife talk him into doing something terrible because he owes money to people who don't take IOUs. But he isn't the architect. She is. And Jensen, he is the mechanic." I leaned forward. "I want a deal." Vance narrowed her eyes. "You aren't charged with anything, Mr. King. Why do you need a deal? Because once you drop the hammer on Jensen, his friends in Chicago are going to come looking for the loose ends. I am a loose end. My son is a loose end. I want protection. I want witness status. I want Darius moved to protective custody immediately. He stays in jail. I am not asking for a pass. He did the crime. He does the time. But I don't want him shanked in the shower because his wife couldn't pay her bills." Vance nodded slowly. "That is reasonable." "And for you, I want immunity," I said. "Immunity for what? For whatever I have to do to make sure Amber King goes to prison for the rest of her natural life. I am going to feed you everything. I am going to give you the recordings of her planning to have me committed. I am going to give you the video of the break-in. I am going to testify that she is the one who bought the fentanyl. But I need to know that when the dust settles, the state isn't going to come after me for recording conversations in my own house or moving a package from one vehicle to another to save my own skin." Vance looked at the file again. She looked at the potential conviction rate. A corrupt doctor, a mob enforcer, a greedy socialite. It was a career maker. She closed the folder. "If this evidence holds up, Mr. King, I can guarantee you that the state will view your actions as necessary self-defense. We will put Darius in solitary for his own safety, and we will put a detail on your house starting tonight." I stood up and extended my hand. "I don't need a detail on my house, Mrs. Vance. I can handle my own perimeter. I just need you to be ready to catch them when I knock them down." She shook my hand. Her grip was firm. "We will be ready," she said. "You get us the rest of those recordings. We will start drawing up the indictments." I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. The pieces were moving. The trap was closing. Amber had lost her job, her reputation, and her husband's loyalty. Now she was about to lose her freedom. But there was one last thing to do. One last nail to drive into the coffin. I needed her to confess to me directly. I needed her to say the words when she thought she had won. I got back in my truck and checked my phone. There was a voicemail from Amber. I played it. "Reggie, Dad, please call me. I am so sorry about last night. It was Jensen. He forced me. He is crazy. I was trying to stop him. Please, we need to talk. I have nowhere to go." She was pivoting again. The predator was playing the victim. She thought she could spin this. She thought I was still just a confused old man who could be manipulated with a few tears. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. I started the engine. I wasn't going to call her back. Not yet. I was going to let her stew. I was going to let her think she had an opening. And then I was going to invite her over for tea. Because the best way to catch a rat isn't to chase it. It is to leave the cheese out and wait for it to get hungry enough to forget about the trap. And Amber. She was starving. My house was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a hunting blind. I sat in my recliner, the leather worn soft by years of rest, but I wasn't resting now. I had staged the room with the precision of a theater set. The curtains were drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the living room in a dim amber gloom. On the side table, I placed a bottle of pills, just vitamins really, but they looked medicinal enough, and a glass of water. I draped a heavy wool blanket over my legs, despite the Georgia heat outside. I leaned my cane against the armrest. I needed to look like a man at the end of his rope. I needed to look like a man who had lost the will to fight. I looked up at the mantel above the fireplace. There sat an old scruffy teddy bear. It had been Darius's when he was 3 years old. One of its button eyes was missing, replaced years ago by a mismatched button my late wife had sewn on. It looked like a piece of sentimental junk, the kind of thing an old man keeps around to remember better days. Amber wouldn't look twice at it. She wouldn't notice that the left eye, the dark glass one, had a glint that was a little too sharp. She wouldn't know that behind that glass was a high-definition lens wired directly to a cloud server that District Attorney Vance was monitoring in real time. I picked up the phone. My hand didn't shake this time. I dialed Amber's number. She answered on the first ring. She was desperate. Desperation makes people fast, but it also makes them careless. "What do you want, Reggie?" Her voice was tight, brittle. She sounded like she hadn't slept in 3 days. The viral video had ruined her. The police were circling. She was cornered, and a cornered animal is always looking for a way out. "Amber," I said, letting my voice crack. I put a wheeze in my breath. I can't do this anymore. The police, the lawyers. It is too much. My heart feels like it is giving out." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing change. She smelled blood. "What are you saying, Reggie?" "I want to end it," I said. "I went to the doctor today, the real one. He said the stress is killing me. I don't have much time left, Amber. I don't want to die fighting my family. I want to make peace." "Peace?" She scoffed, but there was a hungry edge to it. "You humiliated me in front of the whole town. You put my husband in jail." "I know," I whispered. I was angry, but I have been thinking about the boy, about little Malik. Malik was my grandson, 5 years old. I hadn't seen him in 6 months because Amber said I was a bad influence, but he was the only leverage I had left that she would believe. "I want to set up a trust." I lied. "I want to sign over the estate, the house, the accounts, everything. I want it to go to Malik, but since he is a minor, you would be the trustee. You would control it until he is 21. I heard the intake of breath. This was it. The golden ticket. The bailout she needed to pay off Jensen, pay off her debts, and run. "You want to sign everything over?" she asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Today." "Today," I said. "I have the papers here. Marcus drafted them before everything went wrong. I just need to sign them. But I need you to come here. I can't drive. I am too weak." "I will be there in 20 minutes, she said. "Come alone, Amber," I warned. "No Jensen, just family. I want to do this right." "I will be alone," she promised. I hung up. I sat back and waited. I checked the angle of the bear on the mantel one last time. Perfect. 20 minutes later, the silver Mercedes skidded into the driveway. She didn't park politely. She parked like a getaway driver. I heard the car door slam. When she walked in, she didn't knock. She pushed the door open and strode into the living room. She looked terrible. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and she was wearing a trench coat that was too heavy for the weather. She looked around the room, her eyes darting to the corners, checking for traps. She saw the pills. She saw the blanket. She saw the old man slumped in the chair. She reached into her pocket and tapped her phone. I knew what she was doing. She was recording. She wanted proof that I was signing voluntarily. She wanted to cover her tracks in case I tried to claim duress later. She thought she was being clever. "Where are the papers?" she asked, not bothering with a hello. "On the table." I gestured weakly to the coffee table. I had placed a stack of dummy documents there. They looked official. Lots of legal jargon, thick bond paper. She snatched them up and started flipping through them. Her eyes scanned the lines looking for the dollar signs. She saw the valuation of the estate. 10 million. Her eyes widened. She hadn't known it was that much. She thought she was stealing crumbs, and she just found the bakery. This transfers everything," she asked, her voice trembling with greed. "Everything," I said. "But Amber, I need to know something before I sign. I need to clear the air, for my conscience." She looked at me impatient. What do you need to know?" "Darius," I said. "He is my son. He is not smart, Amber. We both know that. He couldn't plan a drive to the grocery store without a GPS. How did he come up with the plan for the drugs? How did he know how to get fentanyl?" Amber laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. She put the papers down and walked over to me. She loomed over the chair, feeling powerful. She thought she had won. She thought the old man was defeated and she was just moments away from the jackpot. "Darius," she sneered. "Darius is a useless idiot. He didn't come up with anything. He was crying in the bathroom the morning we did it. He was scared you would catch him." "So it was you?" I asked softly. "You told him to put it in my truck." "I did more than tell him, Reggie," she said, leaning down, her face inches from mine. "I bought the package. I met the contact in Atlanta. I wrapped it. I drew the map on where to tape it so the dogs would find it, but you wouldn't. Darius was just the delivery boy. He was shaking so bad I thought he was going to drop it in the driveway." "Why?" I asked. "Why do it to me? I never hurt you." "Because you were in the way," she shouted. "You were sitting on this fortune, driving that stupid truck, living like a peasant while we were drowning in debt. You wouldn't die, Reggie. You just kept living. And I needed the money now. Jensen needed his money. The plan was perfect. You go to prison for trafficking, the state seizes the assets I file for hardship as the innocent daughter-in-law and take control of the estate to manage it. It was brilliant." "So Darius is innocent?" I asked. "He just did what he was told." "He is guilty of being a coward," she spat. "That stupid husband of mine only knows how to follow orders. He would have done anything I said. He thought he was saving our marriage. He didn't know he was just buying me a ticket out of here." I nodded slowly. "So you set him up too? You knew he might get caught." "I counted on it," she said, smiling cruelly. "If he got caught, he takes the fall. If you got caught, you take the fall. Either way, I win. I get the house, I get the money, and I get rid of the king men. You are both useless to me now." She straightened up and pointed to the pen on the table. "Enough talking, old man. Sign the papers. You said you wanted to make peace. This is peace. You give me the money and I promise I won't put you in the worst nursing home. I will find one with a window." I looked at her. I looked at the greed that had consumed her humanity. She had confessed to everything. Conspiracy, drug trafficking, fraud. And she had done it while mocking the son I loved. I sat up straight. I pushed the blanket off my legs. I picked up the glass of water and took a long, slow sip. My hand was steady as a rock. "You know, Amber," I said, my voice dropping the wheeze, returning to the deep baritone that used to command a fleet of 50 drivers. "There is one thing you forgot about the Kingmen." She frowned, confused by the sudden change in my demeanor. "What?" "We don't sign deals with terrorists," I said. Amber's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? Sign the damn paper." "I am not signing anything," I said, standing up. I towered over her. "And those papers, they are trash, just blank forms from the internet." "You lied to me," she screeched. "You tricked me." "I learned from the best," I said, "but I have one advantage you don't have." "What is that?" she hissed, reaching into her purse, probably for the gun she had started carrying since the break-in video went viral. "I know when I am being watched," I said. I raised my hand and pointed a calloused finger directly at the mantel, at the scruffy, one-eyed teddy bear that had watched Darius grow up. "Say thank you to the nice district attorney, Amber," I said. "She is watching you live right now, and I think that recording you have in your pocket isn't going to help you much when the state has a 4K video of you confessing to masterminding a federal drug crime." Amber froze. She looked at the bear. She looked at the glass eye. She saw the faint red glimmer of the recording light deep inside the lens. Her face went the color of ash. She realized the trap hadn't been the papers. The trap was the conversation. The trap was her own arrogance. "No," she whispered. "No, you didn't." "I did," I said. "And the police are already at the end of the driveway. I told them to wait until you said the part about Darius being the delivery boy. I wanted to make sure my son had a defense attorney's dream on tape." Amber backed away, stumbling over her own feet. "You old bastard, you ruined me." "You ruined yourself, honey," I said, picking up my cane, not for support, but as a weapon if she tried anything. I just turned on the lights. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder by the second. Blue lights flashed through the sheer curtains, painting the room in the colors of justice. Amber looked at the door, then at me. She looked like she was going to run, but she knew there was nowhere to go. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor, her expensive coat billowing around her like a shroud. "Thank you, daughter-in-law," I said, looking down at her. "You finally gave me exactly what I wanted." I walked over to the door and opened it for the officers. The air outside smelled fresh. The storm was over. Now it was time to clean up the debris. The Superior Court of Fulton County is a building designed to make you feel small. Marble columns, high ceilings, and the echo of footsteps that sounds like the ticking of a clock counting down the rest of your life. I walked in wearing my Sunday best, the navy wool suit that I hadn't worn since my wife's funeral. I didn't sit in the front row. I sat in the back in the shadows leaning on my cane, not because I needed it, but because it made people look away. I wasn't there as a father. I was there as a witness to an execution. Darius sat at the defense table. He looked like a ghost of the man who used to strut around my driveway. The orange jumpsuit hung off his shoulders, and his skin had that gray, pasty look of a man who hasn't seen the sun or eaten a decent meal in weeks. He was shaking. His leg was bouncing under the table, a nervous rhythm I recognized from when he was a boy, waiting for me to check his report card. He was facing 20 years. Mandatory minimums for trafficking that amount of fentanyl are no joke in Georgia. 20 years is a life sentence when you are soft. And then there was Amber. She walked in like she was attending a funeral for a husband who was still breathing. She wore a modest cream-colored dress, a string of pearls, and just enough makeup to look pale and sympathetic. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. She sat in the gallery 3 rows behind the prosecution, positioning herself as the tragic, long-suffering wife who had been deceived by a criminal husband. She looked at the jury when they walked in. She gave them a sad, brave smile. She was working the room. She thought she was safe. She thought the video from the break-in was just internet gossip, inadmissible, irrelevant to the drug charges. She thought she had weathered the storm. She didn't look at me. She knew I was there. I could feel the tension in her neck muscles from 40 feet away, but she refused to turn her head. The prosecutor was a young guy hungry, looking for a conviction to pin on his wall. He laid it out simple and cold. Darius King was caught with 200 grams of fentanyl. He was driving the car. It was his property, open and shut. Then it was time for the defense. The courtroom door opened and Marcus Thorne walked in. He didn't just walk, he glided. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him like armor. He carried a briefcase that looked heavy enough to hold gold bars. A ripple went through the room. Everyone knew Marcus. He didn't take drug cases, he took corporate wars, he took impossible odds. Amber turned around then. Her eyes widened. She saw Marcus sit down next to Darius. She saw Marcus pat Darius on the shoulder. She realized for the first time that her husband wasn't being defended by a public defender who was overworked and underpaid. He was being defended by the shark I had paid for. Darius looked at Marcus confused. He looked back at me. I gave him a single slow nod. He understood. I wasn't saving him from the consequences of his actions, but I wasn't letting him go down alone. Marcus stood up. He didn't do an opening statement. He reserved his time. He waited. He let the prosecution call the arresting officer. He let them establish the facts of the stop. He let them paint Darius as a nervous wreck who confessed to the drugs being in his car. Marcus didn't object. He let the rope play out. Then the prosecution called their star character witness. They called Amber King. She walked to the stand, her heels clicking softly on the floor. She swore on the Bible. She sat down and looked at the jury with big, watery eyes. Mrs. King, the prosecutor, asked gently, "Did you have any knowledge of your husband's involvement with narcotics?" "No," she whispered, her voice trembling perfectly. "Darius. He has been distant lately. He was spending money we didn't have. He told me he was investing in a startup. I had no idea he was moving drugs. I am devastated. I tried to get him help. I tried to get him to talk to his father, but Reggie is struggling with his memory. Darius took advantage of that. She was good. She was weaving the lie into the record, painting herself as the victim and Darius as the villain who exploited a senile old man. She was burying him to save herself. Darius stared at her. His mouth hung open. He couldn't believe it. He was seeing the woman he sold his soul for, and she was tightening the noose around his neck. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked toward the witness stand. He didn't smile. He looked at her like a biologist looks at a bug under a microscope. "Mrs. King," Marcus said, his voice deep and smooth. "You say you had no knowledge of the drugs. You say you were a victim of your husband's deception." "Yes," she said, dabbing her eyes. "And you say my client, your husband, took advantage of his father's declining mental state?" "Yes." "It broke my heart." Marcus nodded slowly. He walked back to the defense table. He picked up a remote control. "Your Honor," Marcus said, turning to the judge. "The defense would like to introduce Exhibit A, a video recording taken inside the residence of Reginald King on the afternoon of October 12th. Authentication has been provided to the clerk." Amber froze. Her hand stopped halfway to her face with the tissue. She knew the date. It was 2 days ago. Objection, the prosecutor stood up. We haven't seen this evidence. It was submitted to your office this morning at 8 a.m. Counselor Marcus shot back without looking at him. Maybe check your inbox before you try to send a man to prison for 20 years. The judge waved his hand. Proceed, Mr. Thorne. Marcus pointed the remote at the large screen mounted on the wall facing the jury. He pressed play. The courtroom filled with the dim amber light of my living room. The image was crystal clear. There was the scruffy teddy bear on the mantel, its glass eye capturing the entire scene. There was me slumped in the chair looking weak. And there was Amber. The audio was perfect. Her voice rang out sharp and cruel, echoing off the high ceilings of the courtroom. I did more than tell him, Reggie. I bought the package. I met the contact in Atlanta. I wrapped it. I drew the map on where to tape it so the dogs would find it, but you wouldn't. Darius was just the delivery boy. The gasp from the jury box was audible. The prosecutor dropped his pen. The judge leaned forward, his glasses sliding down his nose. On the screen, Amber continued to dig her own grave. He is guilty of being a coward. That stupid husband of mine only knows how to follow orders. He would have done anything I said. He thought he was saving our marriage. He didn't know he was just buying me a ticket out of here. In the courtroom, the real Amber turned white. Not pale, white, like the blood had simply ceased to exist in her veins. She gripped the railing of the witness box so hard her knuckles looked like they were going to burst through the skin. She looked at the screen, then at Marcus, then at me. She saw me in the back row. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was looking right at her. I touched the brim of my hat. On the screen, the video, Amber laughed. If he got caught, he takes the fall. If you got caught, you take the fall. Either way, I win. I get the house, I get the money, and I get rid of the king men. Marcus paused the video. The image froze on Amber's face, twisted in a sneer of triumph. Marcus turned back to the real Amber. Mrs. King, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried to every corner of the room. Did you or did you not just perjure yourself before this court? Did you or did you not organize the purchase and planting of 200 grams of fentanyl with the express intent of framing your father-in-law and incarcerating your husband to steal an estate valued at over $10 million? Amber opened her mouth. No sound came out. She looked like a fish on a dock. Then the explosion happened. Darius stood up. He didn't just stand, he erupted. The chair flew backward and hit the wall. The chains on his ankles rattled like machine gun fire. You witch, he screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak and rage. You set me up. You told me we were doing it for us. You told me you loved me. He lunged. He scrambled over the defense table, papers flying everywhere. He was reaching for her. He wanted to tear her apart. He wanted to destroy the thing that had destroyed him. Darius down, Marcus shouted, stepping back. The bailiffs were on him in a second. 3 of them tackled him before he could get halfway to the witness stand. They slammed him to the floor. Darius was sobbing now, screaming into the carpet, screaming her name, screaming curses. You sold me. You sold me out. Amber shrank back in the witness chair, terrified. She looked at the jury. They weren't looking at Darius with fear. They were looking at her with disgust. They saw the monster. And it wasn't the man in the orange jumpsuit. Order. The judge banged his gavel. Order in this court. The bailiffs hauled Darius up. He was limp now, the fight drained out of him. He looked at me. His eyes were begging for forgiveness, begging for an end to the nightmare. The judge looked at Amber. His face was hard as granite. Mrs. King, you are to remain seated. Bailiff, take Mr. King to the holding cell. We are in recess for 15 minutes. And Counselor, the judge pointed at the prosecutor. You better have an arrest warrant drafted before I get back from my chambers. The prosecutor looked shell-shocked. Your Honor, I move to dismiss the charges against Darius King with prejudice pending further investigation into this. Denied, the judge snapped. We will discuss the charges against Mr. King later. Right now, there is a felony that just occurred in my courtroom. Perjury, conspiracy, and from the looks of that video, federal drug trafficking. He pointed a finger at the bailiff standing near the door. Take her into custody. Do not let her leave this building. Amber screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a noise. No. You can't. I am the victim. He tricked me. The old man tricked me. 2 female bailiffs moved in. They didn't treat her gently. They grabbed her arms and pulled her out of the witness box. They spun her around. The click of the handcuffs was loud in the silence of the room. "Reggie," she screamed, spotting me in the back. Tell them you tricked me. You set me up." I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. I walked to the aisle as they dragged her past me. She was kicking her heels, scraping across the floor, her hair coming loose from its perfect bun. I leaned in close as she passed. "I didn't trick you, Amber," I said, my voice low and steady. "I just let you talk." She spat at me. It missed, landing on my shoe. The bailiffs shoved her through the side door, her screams echoing down the hallway until the heavy door slammed shut, cutting off the noise. The courtroom was silent. The jury was staring at me. The prosecutor was staring at me. Marcus was packing up his briefcase, looking like he just won the Super Bowl. I looked down at my shoe. I took a handkerchief from my pocket and wiped off the spit. I folded the handkerchief and put it back. I looked at the empty defense table where my son had been sitting. He was going back to a cell, but the lock was broken. He knew the truth now. The truth had set him free, even if his body was still caged. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. The reporters were waiting outside. I could see them through the glass doors, a pack of wolves waiting for a quote. I adjusted my hat. I wasn't going to give them a quote. I was going to give them silence. The war wasn't over. Jensen was still out there. The money trail still needed to be followed, but the head of the snake had been cut off. I pushed open the doors and stepped out into the Atlanta heat. It felt good. It felt like winning. The cartel does not believe in write-offs. In the logistics business, if a shipment goes missing, you file an insurance claim. In the drug business, if a shipment goes missing, you file a body. I knew this. I knew that 200 grams of pure fentanyl wasn't just a felony, it was an investment. Someone had fronted that product to Jensen, and that someone wasn't going to just shrug and walk away because Amber got arrested. Jensen was a cleaner, but now he was the mess. He was exposed. His cover as a lawyer was blown, his girlfriend was in handcuffs, and he had lost the product. He had two choices: run to Mexico and hope they didn't find him, or get the money to pay back his bosses. And he knew where the money was supposed to be. I was driving a rented 20-foot box truck down a stretch of Highway 29 that ran through the Pine Barrens. It was 2 a.m. The road was empty, just a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the black wall of trees. I wasn't moving furniture. The truck was supposedly loaded with the assets I had liquidated from the safe, the gold, the cash, the things Amber had been screaming about. I had let that information leak through a phone call I knew was being tapped. Ghost had confirmed that Jensen was listening. Jensen was desperate, and desperate men take the bait every single time. I checked my side mirrors. Twin beams of xenon headlights cut through the darkness about a quarter-mile back. Then another set, then a third. They weren't using sirens. They were moving in a tight formation, closing the gap fast. 3 black SUVs, Escalades or Suburbans, heavy, fast, and armored. I didn't speed up. I kept the truck steady at 55. I reached into the cup holder and picked up the radio handset. "Target is in sight," I said calmly. 3 bogeys. Formation fits the profile. Copy that, King. Hold your line. Wait for the pinch. The voice on the other end was Commander Reynolds of the State Tactical Unit. We had spent the last 6 hours planning this dance. He wanted Jensen. He wanted the connection to the cartel. I just wanted it over. The lead SUV gunned its engine and swung into the oncoming lane, pulling alongside my cab. The window rolled down. I saw a face covered in a ski mask and the barrel of a submachine gun pointing at my tires. He gestured for me to pull over. I didn't panic. I tapped the brakes, letting the truck shudder and slow down. I pulled onto the wide gravel shoulder, kicking up a cloud of dust. The SUV in front cut me off, slamming on its brakes to force a stop. The one behind boxed me in tight. The third one pulled up alongside, blocking the road. It was a classic ambush. Textbook. If I had been a civilian, I would have been wetting my pants. But I wasn't a civilian. I was the bait. I put the truck in park. I turned off the engine. I put the keys on the dashboard. I raised my hands where they could see them. Doors flew open. 6 men jumped out. They were dressed in tactical gear, but it was sloppy. Mismatched vests, no unit patches. Hired guns. Mercenaries working for the cartel's Atlanta cell. And in the middle of them was Jensen. He wasn't wearing his suit anymore. He was wearing a leather jacket and jeans, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were wild, darting around the empty highway. He had a pistol in his hand, a heavy Desert Eagle that was more for show than accuracy. "Get out!" he screamed, leveling the gun at my windshield. "Get out now, old man, or I will put a round through your chest." I opened the door and stepped down onto the gravel. The night air was cool, smelling of pine and exhaust. I kept my hands up, moving slowly. "Where is it?" Jensen marched up to me, shoving the gun into my cheek. The metal was hot. "Where is the money? Where is the gold you owe me, Reggie?" "You cost me everything. You did this to yourself, son," I said, my voice steady. "You got greedy. You tried to rob the wrong house. Shut up." He pistol whipped me. It wasn't a hard blow, just enough to split my lip. I tasted copper. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him. "I need that buyout. The people I work for. They want their pound of flesh. If I don't give them the cash, they are going to peel me apart. So you are going to open that truck and you are going to give me everything you have. And if I don't," I asked, "then I kill you right here," he said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I kill you. I blow the lock and I take it anyway. Nobody is coming to save you, Reggie. Your son is in jail. Your lawyer is asleep. You are alone." I looked at the 6 gunmen surrounding us. They were tense, watching the woods, watching the road. They knew this was high risk. They wanted to get in and get out. "You want what is in the truck?" I asked. "Open it," Jensen snarled. I walked to the back of the box truck. Jensen followed me, keeping the gun pressed to the base of my skull. The other men fanned out, weapons raised, covering the perimeter. I reached for the latch on the roll-up door. "It is heavy," I said. "I might need a hand." "Just open it," Jensen shouted. I grabbed the handle. I looked at the reflection in the shiny metal of the latch. I could see Jensen behind me. I could see the greed in his eyes. He thought he was seconds away from salvation. He thought inside that dark cargo hold lay millions of dollars in gold coins and cash. He thought he was going to buy his life back. I yanked the door upward. It rolled up with a loud metallic clatter that echoed in the silence of the night. Jensen stepped forward, flashlight beam cutting into the darkness of the cargo bay. "Surprise," I whispered. The inside of the truck wasn't filled with gold. It was filled with men. 12 SWAT operators in full heavy armor were kneeling in 2 rows, weapons raised, laser sights painting Jensen's chest with a dozen red dots. "Freeze, police." The shout was simultaneous, a wall of sound that hit Jensen like a physical blow. Flashbangs deployed. 2 canisters rolled out of the truck and exploded at Jensen's feet with a blinding white light and a concussive boom that shook the ground. I had already dropped to the gravel, covering my ears, rolling under the chassis of the truck as we had planned. Chaos erupted. The gunmen tried to return fire, but they were blinded and deafened. The SWAT team poured out of the back of the truck like a black tide. Suppressed rifle fire coughed into the night. Thwip, thwip, thwip. It was precise. It was controlled. Jensen screamed. He fired one wild shot into the air before a round took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He dropped the gun. He dropped to his knees. The other gunmen didn't last long. 3 were on the ground, zip-tied within 10 seconds. 2 tried to run for the SUVs and were taken down by the perimeter team that had emerged from the woods. 1 foolish soul tried to raise his rifle and took 2 rounds to the vest, knocking the wind out of him. It was over in 45 seconds. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Reynolds shouted. "Secure the targets." I crawled out from under the truck. My knees were dusty, my lip was bleeding, but I was standing. The highway was lit up now. Support vehicles that had been waiting a mile back came screaming in sirens, blaring floodlights, turning the scene into day. I watched as they dragged Jensen to a patrol car. He was bleeding, crying, begging. He saw me standing there. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and absolute disbelief. "You set me up," he screamed as they shoved him into the back seat. "You old devil, you set me up." I didn't say anything. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my pack of cigarettes. I hadn't smoked in 10 years, but tonight felt like a special occasion. I lit one, the flame of the lighter illuminating my face for a brief second. I took a deep drag, letting the smoke fill my lungs, calming the adrenaline spike. Commander Reynolds walked over. He had his helmet off, wiping sweat from his brow. "You okay, Reggie? That was a hell of a risk. He had a gun to your head." I exhaled a plume of gray smoke into the night air. "He never had a gun to my head, Commander. He had a gun to his own temple. He just didn't know I was the one pulling the trigger." Reynolds chuckled, shaking his head. "You are a crazy son of a gun, King. We got them all. Jensen, the shooters, the vehicles. This links the whole cell. The feds are going to be very happy with you." What about the package, I asked. We found it in the lead SUV, Reynolds said. They brought cash to pay you off if you negotiated, and they brought tools to cut you up if you didn't. They were ready for anything except a tactical team in a U-Haul. I nodded. I watched the paramedics patch up the wounded gunmen. I watched the tow trucks arriving to haul away the black SUVs. The cartel had made their move. They had sent their best cleaner. They had sent a hit squad. And they had lost. I took another drag of the cigarette. The tobacco tasted bitter, but the victory tasted sweet. This wasn't just about saving my life anymore. This was about cleaning the slate. Amber was gone. Darius was safe in jail. Jensen was broken. I flicked the cigarette butt onto the asphalt and crushed it with the heel of my boot. I am done here, I said to Reynolds. Can one of your boys give me a ride back to my truck? I have a house to put back together. Reynolds clapped me on the shoulder. Anytime, Reggie. Anytime. I walked toward the cruiser. The night was quiet again. The crickets started chirping, reclaiming their territory. The predators were caged. The old lion was still walking. And I had one more stop to make before this war was truly over. I had to go see the woman who started it all. I had to look Amber in the eye one last time, not as a victim, but as the man who signed her eviction notice from the free world. The collapse of an empire is usually loud. Buildings fall, cannons fire, people scream. But the collapse of Amber and Darius King was quiet. It was the sound of a gavel hitting a block of wood. It was the sound of a pen scratching on a seizure order. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut. I stood on the sidewalk outside the luxury condo they had rented but hadn't paid for in 3 months. I watched the U.S. Marshals carry out the furniture, the white leather sofa where they had plotted to put me in a home, the 60-inch television where they watched reality shows while ignoring the reality of their own debt. It was all coming out piece by gaudy piece to be auctioned off to pay the creditors. The Mercedes was already gone, hooked up to a tow truck and dragged away like a dead beetle. Darius was in the county lockup awaiting transfer to a federal holding facility. He was facing 20 years, but the plea deal I had orchestrated for him might knock it down to 5 if he kept his mouth shut and testified against Jensen. He was broken. I had seen him once since the trial. He didn't have any fight left. He just cried and asked about his mother, a woman he hadn't thought about in a decade, until he needed comfort. But I wasn't here for Darius. I had one more stop to make. One more loose end to tie off before I could wash my hands of this filth. I drove my truck to the State Women's Detention Center. It was a bleak concrete box sitting in the middle of a scorched field surrounded by razor wire that glinted in the harsh Georgia sun. This wasn't the county jail. This was where they put the ones who weren't going home. Amber had been denied bail. The judge considered her a massive flight risk given her connections to Jensen and the cartel money. She had been in there for a week without designer creams, a week without a blow dryer, a week without anyone to boss around. I walked through the security checkpoints. The guards knew me by now. I was the star witness. I was the man who brought down the ring. They nodded at me with respect. They checked my cane, but they didn't ask me to leave it behind. They brought her into the visitation room in shackles. If I hadn't known it was her, I wouldn't have recognized the woman who sat down on the other side of the glass. The blonde hair was dull and greasy, pulled back with a cheap rubber band. Her skin was sallow, broken out in stress hives. She had lost weight, her prison uniform hanging off her like a sack. But it was the eyes that got me. The arrogance was gone. The predator was gone. In their place was a terrified, desperate animal. She picked up the phone. Her hands were shaking so hard the receiver rattled against her ear. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was a cracked ruin. "Daddy, please. You have to help me." I picked up my phone. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. I let the silence stretch out heavy and suffocating. "They are going to kill me in here, Reggie," she sobbed. "The other women, they know who I am. They know I had money. They think I still have it. They took my shoes. They took my food. Please, I can't do this. I am not built for this." She was right. She wasn't built for consequences. She was built for consumption. She was a parasite that had finally run out of hosts. "I am young Reggie," she pleaded, leaning against the glass, her breath fogging it up. "I have my whole life ahead of me. I made a mistake. I know I did. But I learned my lesson. I swear, if you get me a good lawyer, if you pay for the appeal, I will go away. I will never bother you or Darius again. I will sign whatever you want. Just get me out of here. Please. You are a good man. You are a Christian man. You can't leave me in here to die." She was playing the only card she had left, pity. She thought that because I was old, because I went to church, because I had loved her once as a daughter-in-law, that I would have mercy. She thought my heart was soft. She forgot that the heart is a muscle, and muscles get hard when they have to carry a heavy load for too long. I leaned forward. I looked deep into those watery, terrified eyes. "I am a good man, Amber," I said. My voice was low, steady, the rumble of a storm that has already passed but left the ground soaked. "But I am not a fool, and I am not your father." She flinched. "You called me Daddy," I continued. "You called me Dad for 5 years. You ate at my table. You slept under my roof. You took the gifts I gave you. You smiled in my face while you were sharpening the knife to stick in my back." I was scared, she wailed. I was desperate. Jensen threatened me. "Lies," I said. "Jensen didn't threaten you until you lost the money. You sought him out. You sought the doctor out. You were the architect, Amber. You drew the blueprints for my destruction. You looked at a man who treated you like blood, and you saw a piggy bank to be smashed." "Reggie, please." "Shut up," I snapped. The command was sharp enough to make her jump. "You aren't my daughter," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "You never were. You are a stranger who walked into my house and poisoned the air. You are a white devil who swallowed my son's soul." She stared at me, her mouth hanging open. She had never heard me speak like that. She had never seen the hate that I had buried deep under the manners and the patience. "You took a good boy, a weak boy, but a good one, and you turned him into a criminal," I said. "You fed his greed. You whispered entitlement into his ear until he couldn't hear his own conscience. You broke him, Amber. You took everything that was light in him and you snuffed it out because you wanted a new car and a vacation house." "That is not fair," she cried. "Darius is a grown man. He made his own choices. He made choices to please you," I said, "because he thought you were the prize. He didn't know you were the punishment." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a folded document. It wasn't thick. It wasn't complicated. It was a single sheet of paper, legal size, stamped with the seal of the court. I pressed it against the glass. Amber squinted at it. She read the header, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." She looked at the signature at the bottom. It was shaky, written with a hand that was probably trembling, but it was legible. Darius King. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. He signed this," she whispered. "I visited him yesterday," I said. "I played him the recording of you in the shed. I showed him the pictures of you and Jensen. I told him about the deal you tried to cut with the prosecutor to testify against him. I told him everything, Amber. I stripped away every lie you ever told him." "No," she moaned. "No, he loves me. He wouldn't do this." "He doesn't love you," I said. "He hates you. He hates you with the fire of a man who realizes he threw his life away for a mirage." He signed the papers, Amber. "He is filing for divorce, and he is testifying against you. He is going to tell the jury everything, every conversation, every plan, every time you called me an old monkey. He is going to burn you to the ground to save whatever is left of his own soul." Amber slumped back in her chair. The fight went out of her. She looked small. She looked finished. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this? You won. You have your money. You have your house. Why do you have to destroy me?" "Because you came from my family," I said. "You tried to erase me. You tried to bury me in a hole so deep no one would ever find me. I am just returning the favor." I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. "You are going to prison, Amber," I said. "You are going to go away for a long time. And when you get out, if you ever get out, you will have nothing. No husband, no money, no name. You will just be a felon with a story about how she almost got away with it." I stood up. My knees didn't pop. I felt strong. I felt light. "Reggie, wait. Don't go." She started screaming. She started banging the phone against the glass. The guards moved in. They grabbed her by the shoulders. "Please, I will do anything. I will sign anything. Don't leave me here, Daddy." I turned my back on her. I walked toward the exit. I could hear her screams echoing off the concrete walls, a high, thin sound of absolute despair. It sounded like a ghost. It sounded like the past dying. I pushed through the heavy steel doors and walked out into the sunlight. The air was hot and thick, smelling of pine and asphalt. I took a deep breath. It tasted like closure. I walked to my truck. I climbed in and started the engine. I checked my watch. It was noon. I had a lunch date with Marcus. We had paperwork to finalize. We had a trust to set up. I looked at the prison one last time in the rearview mirror. It was just a building now, a warehouse for bad decisions. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I didn't look back. The collapse was complete. The dust was settling. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was clear. The sound of a heavy steel door sliding shut has a finality to it that you never get used to. I sat in the visitation room of the federal penitentiary, my hands resting on the cold metal table. Darius sat across from me. He wasn't wearing the orange jumpsuit of the county jail anymore. He was wearing the beige uniform of a federal inmate. His hair was cut short, almost shaved, to the scalp. He had lost 20 pounds. The softness was gone from his face, replaced by the hollow, haunted look of a man who knows he has lost the best years of his life. 5 years. That was the deal. Marcus Thorne had worked miracles. He had traded the evidence against Jensen, the testimony against Amber, and my own statement of leniency to get the prosecutor to drop the trafficking charge down to possession with intent, with a heavy mitigating factor of coercion. Darius wasn't going away for 20 years. He wasn't going to die in prison. But 5 years is a long time. 5 years is a lifetime when you are used to sleeping on Egyptian cotton and driving German cars. He wasn't screaming anymore. He wasn't blaming me. He was crying. Not the loud, performative sobbing he did when he got arrested. This was a quiet, steady stream of tears leaking out of a broken soul. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Marcus told me what you did. He told me you paid for the plea negotiation. He told me you asked the judge for mercy. I don't deserve it. I know I don't." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised, the man who had tried to bury me to pay for his mistakes. I didn't feel hate anymore. Hate takes energy. I just felt a deep, heavy exhaustion. "You are right," I said, my voice flat. "You don't deserve it. You taped a brick of poison to my truck. You were ready to let me die in a cell so you could keep playing big shot. You spit on everything I ever taught you." "I know," he sobbed, his shoulders shaking. "I am so sorry. I was weak. Amber." She got in my head. She made it sound like it was the only way. "I was scared, Dad. I was scared of the people I owed money to." "Fear makes you do stupid things, Darius," I said. "But it doesn't make you evil. That was a choice. You chose her over me. You chose the easy way out. And now you are doing the hard time." I leaned forward. The chains on his wrists clinked against the table. "Listen to me, son. And listen good, because this is the last time I am going to give you advice." He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "I didn't save you because I pity you," I said. "I didn't spend $50,000 on Marcus Thorne to keep you out of maximum security because I think you are a victim. You are not a victim. You are a volunteer." Darius flinched. "I saved you because you are my blood," I continued, "and because I wanted you to live long enough to learn the lesson. If you went away for 20 years, you would have just become an animal. You would have blamed the system. You would have blamed me. You would have died angry. 5 years. 5 years gives you time to think. It gives you time to remember every meal I put on your table, every time I bailed you out of trouble, every time I told you that a man is defined by his word and his work." I pointed a finger at him through the glass partition. "Don't you ever bite the hand that feeds you, Darius. That is the lesson. You tried to cut off the hand that raised you, and look where it got you. You are starving in a cage. You let a woman who didn't love you convince you to kill the only person who did." He put his head in his hands and wept. I watched him for a minute. I didn't feel the urge to comfort him. That part of me, the father who kissed boo-boos and paid for tuition, was gone. It had died the day I found that envelope. "When you get out," I said, standing up, "don't come looking for the house. It won't be there. And don't come looking for a handout. You are going to start from zero. You are going to learn what it means to build something from the ground up, just like I did." "Dad, wait," he pleaded, looking up. "Where are you going? Will you visit me?" I adjusted my hat. "I don't know, Darius. I have some traveling to do. You do your time. Keep your head down. Keep your mouth shut. And maybe in 5 years, if you come out a man instead of a parasite, we can have a cup of coffee. But until then, you are on your own." I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I heard him calling my name, but it sounded like an echo from a life I had already left behind. I walked out of the prison and into the parking lot. Marcus was leaning against his car, checking his phone. He looked up as I approached. "Done?" he asked. "Done," I said. He handed me a set of keys. "The closing is finished, Reggie. The wire transfer hit your account an hour ago. The buyers are developers. They're going to bulldoze the lot next week, put up condos." "Good," I said. "Let them tear it down." I drove back to the house one last time. It was empty now. The furniture was gone, sold, or donated. The echoes of my life bounced off the bare walls. I walked through the rooms. The kitchen where my wife used to sing while she cooked. The living room where I watched football on Sundays. The bedroom where I slept alone for 10 years. It was just wood and sheetrock now. The spirit had left the building. Amber had defiled it. Darius had betrayed it. The memories were there, but they were tainted. Every time I looked at the driveway, I saw the police lights. Every time I looked at the study, I saw the safe they tried to rob. It was time to go. I walked out to the driveway. My old Ford F-150 was gone. I had sold it to a kid down the street who needed a work truck. It was a good truck, but it belonged to the old Reggie. Parked in its place was a beast, a 45-foot Marathon Coach RV, custom built, stainless steel exterior, marble floors, a diesel engine that could pull a freight train. It cost more than the house I had just sold, and I paid cash. It wasn't a camper. It was a land yacht. It was freedom on 18 wheels. I ran my hand along the side of the RV. It was cool to the touch. This was my new home. No address, no mailbox for subpoenas, no doorstep for ungrateful children to darken, just the road and the horizon. But I had one last ritual to perform. I walked to the backyard. The hole where they had dug for the gold was filled in, but the scar on the earth remained. I had set up a rusted metal burn barrel in the center of the yard. I had a box with me. It was the only box I hadn't put in storage or loaded onto the RV. It was the family albums, decades of photos. I stood over the barrel and opened the box. There was Darius at his first birthday, his face covered in cake. Into the barrel. There was Darius at his high school graduation, smiling, thinking he knew everything. Into the barrel. There was the wedding photo, Darius and Amber cutting the cake. Her smile was fake. Even then I realized I just hadn't seen it. Into the barrel. There were photos of Christmases, of vacations, of a family that I thought was solid, but turned out to be made of paper. I poured lighter fluid over the pile of glossy memories. The smell of naphtha filled the air, sharp and chemical. I lit a match. I watched the flame dance on the wood stick for a second. It was a small thing, but it held the power of purification. I dropped the match. The fire roared up with a whoosh. The faces of my son and his wife curled and blackened. The plastic coating on the photos bubbled and melted. I watched the smoke rise into the Georgia sky. It was black and thick. It carried the weight of my disappointment away. I watched until there was nothing left but ash. I watched until the fire burned itself out. I reached into my shirt pocket. I pulled out a single photograph. It was old, the edges worn soft. It was black and white. It was me and my wife Sarah on the day I came home from Vietnam. We were young. I was skinny in my uniform. She was beautiful, her hair done up, her smile capable of lighting up a trench. We had nothing then, just each other and a dream. I kissed the photo. "It is just us again, baby," I whispered. I put the photo back in my pocket right over my heart. I turned away from the burn barrel. I turned away from the empty house. I walked to the RV and climbed up the steps. The door hissed shut behind me, sealing out the heat and the memories. I sat in the driver's seat. It was an air ride captain's chair, comfortable and commanding. The dashboard was lit up with digital gauges and GPS screens. I turned the key. The massive diesel engine rumbled to life beneath me. It was a deep, powerful sound. The sound of power. The sound of moving on. I released the air brakes. The hiss was like a sigh of relief. I put the transmission in drive. I pulled out of the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel for the last time. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I knew what was back there. Ash and ghosts. I turned onto the county road heading west. The The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. I had a full tank of fuel and $10 million in the bank. I had the open road. Reggie King was dead. The man driving the bus was just a traveler. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know where I was going. And I didn't care. I just drove. The highway stretched out in front of me, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the belly of America. The hum of the RV's diesel engine was a steady, comforting rhythm, a bass line to the silence of my new life. But before I could truly disappear into the sunset, there was one last piece of business that had to be settled. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. People in Oak Haven looked at me and saw a retired truck driver with grease under his fingernails and a pension that barely covered his medication. They saw an old man in a flannel shirt who fixed his own gutters. They didn't know what I really was. They didn't know that for 30 years, I wasn't just driving trucks. I was the architect of the entire supply chain from Detroit to Atlanta. I was the holder of the transportation key. That is what the industry called it back in the day. It wasn't a physical key. It was a network. It was the contracts, the shipping lanes, the handshake deals with union bosses and port authorities that kept the East Coast moving when everything else stopped. When I sold my company in '99, I didn't just sell the trucks. I sold the infrastructure. I sold the guarantee that when a blizzard hit Chicago, the grocery stores in Boston would still have milk. That kind of guarantee costs money, real money. The $10 million in my offshore accounts wasn't a nest egg. It was the buyout of a lifetime, and I had hidden it, protected it, and let it grow, waiting for the day I could pass it on to a son who was worthy of the wait. Darius wasn't worthy. Not yet. But I wasn't going to let the money die with me, and I wasn't going to let it rot in a bank vault while my bloodline withered in a cage. I had met with Marcus Thorne one last time before I fired up the RV. We sat in his corner office overlooking the city that was trying to forget me. I laid the ledger on his mahogany desk. "You know what this is, Marcus," I said. He nodded, his eyes scanning the figures. "I do, Reggie. This is enough money to buy freedom, or enough money to buy a whole lot of trouble." "It is a burden," I corrected him. "And I need you to build a structure that can hold it. I want to create a living trust, the Sarah King Memorial Trust." Marcus pulled out a legal pad. "What are the terms? Total assets, $10 million, I said. "But the beneficiary doesn't get a dime. Not today, not tomorrow." Marcus stopped writing. He looked at me over his spectacles. "Then who gets it, Darius?" I said. "But only the Darius that exists in the future. The Darius that has been forged in fire." I laid out the terms. They were brutal. They were absolute. Marcus wrote them down, his pen scratching furiously, a small smile playing on his lips as he realized the genius of the trap I was setting. This wasn't a gift. It was a gauntlet. The execution of that trust happened 3 days later while I was crossing the state line into Alabama. I wasn't there to see it, but I know exactly how it played out. I had scripted every word. Marcus walked into the federal detention center. He was wearing his three-piece suit, carrying that heavy leather briefcase that smelled of justice. He sat down across from Darius in the private attorney-client room. Darius was looking better than the day of the arrest, but the reality of his 5-year sentence was starting to settle in. The fear was gone, replaced by a dull, aching hopelessness. He thought his life was over. He thought I had abandoned him to the wolves. Marcus placed the document on the table. It was thick, bound in blue paper. "What is this?" Darius asked, his voice raspy. "Is this the divorce papers?" "Those are already filed," Marcus said, his voice professional and cold. "This is your father's will, or rather his living trust. He has liquidated his assets. He has left the state. He wanted you to know where things stand before he disappears." Darius flinched. "He left. He is really gone. He is gone, Darius, and he isn't coming back. But he left something for you." Marcus opened the folder. He didn't hand it to Darius. He read from it. "The Sarah King Memorial Trust is funded with a principal amount of $10,400,000. Darius's jaw dropped. The air left the room. $10 million? Dad has $10 million. He does, Marcus confirmed. He was the transportation key. Darius. He ran the logistics for the entire eastern seaboard. He didn't just drive the trucks, he owned the road. And he hid it because he wanted you to make your own way. Darius put his head in his hands. He was crying again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was the crushing weight of realization. He had tried to steal a house worth 500 grand, tried to frame his father for a few $1,000s in drug debts while sitting on top of an empire he never bothered to ask about. He had tried to rob a bank vault by picking the lock on the janitor's closet. Marcus continued reading. The terms were specific. The beneficiary, Darius King, shall have no access to the principal amount, not now, not ever. The principal remains locked in high-yield bonds. Darius looked up confused. Then what is the point? The point is, the interest, Marcus said. The interest generates approximately $400,000 a year. That is a lot of money, Darius. That is a life-changing amount of money. So I get the interest, Darius asked, a glimmer of the old greed sparking in his eyes. Marcus held up a hand. Let me finish. You get the interest distributed in monthly stipends equivalent to the current federal minimum wage adjusted for inflation. Darius blinked. Minimum wage? Marcus nodded. But there are conditions. Preconditions. First, you must complete your full sentence of 5 years. No early parole for good behavior. You do the time, you pay the debt. Okay, Darius whispered. I can do that, second Marcus said, leaning forward. Upon your release, you must maintain full-time employment for a period of 10 consecutive years, and not just any employment. The trust specifies manual labor, construction, sanitation, landscaping. You have to work with your hands. You have to sweat. You have to come home tired every single day. You have to submit pay stubs to the trustee every month. 10 years, Darius choked out. 10 years of manual labor. 10 years, Marcus said. If you miss a month, the clock resets. If you get fired for cause, the clock resets. If you try to borrow against the trust is dissolved. And if I do it, Darius asked, if I do the 10 years, then and only then, Marcus said, closing the folder, you get the monthly interest payments. Not the principal, just the interest. Enough to live comfortably. Enough to buy a house. Enough to send your own kids to college if you ever have any. But you will never be rich, Darius. You will never be a big shot. You will be a working man who has a safety net. And if I refuse, Darius asked, or if I fail? Marcus smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. If you fail to meet these conditions or if you attempt to contest this trust in court, the entire principal sum of $10 million is immediately liquidated and donated to the Disabled Veterans of America in the name of Reginald King. The silence in the room was absolute. Darius stared at the blue folder. He was processing the magnitude of the trap. It wasn't a punishment. It was a blueprint. I had designed a life for him, a life he had refused to build for himself. I was forcing him to become the man I always wanted him to be, and I was using the money he coveted as the carrot to make him pull the cart. I wasn't giving him a handout. I was giving him a shovel. Darius looked at Marcus. He looked at the bars on the window, and then he started to laugh. It started as a low chuckle, then built into a shaking, tear-filled release. He laughed until he was gasping for air. He laughed because he finally understood. He is a crazy old bastard, Darius said, wiping his eyes. He is, Marcus agreed. But he is a crazy old bastard who loves you enough to make sure you don't die a bum. He is saving you from yourself, Darius. He knows that if he gave you this money today, you would be dead in a week. You would overdose, or the cartel would kill you for it. This trust, it is a shield. It keeps you poor enough to stay alive and hungry enough to become a man. Darius reached out and touched the folder. He ran his finger over the gold lettering of his mother's name. He kept the pictures, Darius whispered. He burned everything else, but he kept the picture of Mom. He did, Marcus said. Darius looked up. His eyes were clear. The red was gone. The fog of entitlement was lifting, burned away by the harsh light of reality. Tell him I accept, Darius said. Tell him I will pick up the shovel. I can't tell him anything, Marcus said, standing up and picking up the briefcase. He is gone, Darius. No phone, no address. He is a ghost on the highway now, but I will be watching. I am the trustee. I will be the one checking your pay stubs in 5 years. Don't disappoint me. Marcus turned and walked to the door. He knocked for the guard. Wait, Darius called out. Marcus stopped. Does he hate me? Marcus looked back at the man in the orange jumpsuit. If he hated you, Darius, he would have left you the money today. He would have let the money kill you. Instead, he gave you a job. In Reggie's world, that is the highest form of love there is. The door opened. Marcus walked out. Darius sat there alone in the room. He looked at his hands. They were soft, uncalloused, manicured. He made a fist. He looked at the knuckles. He had 5 years to think about it. And then he had 10 years to work for it. 15 years from now, he would be 50. He would be tired. His back would hurt. But he would be alive, and he would have earned his place in the world. I drove the RV into the setting sun, crossing the Mississippi River. I didn't need to be there to know he took the deal. I knew my son. I knew that deep down under the layers of amber poison and easy money, there was a king in there somewhere. It just needed to be dug out. I had done my job. I had protected the estate. I had cleaned the house. And I had saved my boy the only way I knew how, by taking everything away from him until he learned how to carry it. The road ahead was long. I had a lot of miles to cover. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't hauling cargo for anyone else. I was just driving. And that was enough. The diesel engine of the marathon coach hummed beneath me, a low, steady vibration that felt more like a heartbeat than a machine. It was a 45-foot beast of stainless steel and freedom, a land yacht that I had bought with cash, no questions asked. I sat in the captain's chair, the leather cool against my back, my hands resting lightly on the massive steering wheel. The dashboard was a constellation of digital gauges, GPS screens, and indicators, all glowing with a soft, reassuring green light. Everything was in the green. Fuel, oil pressure, air brakes, life. I looked out the panoramic windshield at the driveway that had been my entrance and exit for 20 years. The gravel was the same. The mailbox was the same, leaning slightly to the left where I had backed into it years ago. But the house standing at the end of that driveway was different. It was just a shell now. The furniture was gone. The pictures were burned. The secrets were dug up and scattered. It was no longer a home. It was just a piece of real estate waiting for a bulldozer. I released the air brakes. The hiss was sharp and final, like the house exhaling for the last time. I put the transmission into drive. The massive vehicle lurched forward, heavy but graceful. I rolled down the driveway, the tires crunching over the stones. I didn't look back at the burn barrel in the backyard where the faces of my son and his wife had turned to ash. I didn't look back at the porch where I had sat drinking tea while Darius taped a felony to my truck. That life was in the rearview mirror, getting smaller with every revolution of the wheels. I turned onto the county road, heading west. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the Georgia sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. It was the kind of sunset that makes you believe in God, or at least in the idea that endings can be beautiful. I was 75 years old. Most men my age were settling into recliners, waiting for the grandkids to visit, waiting for the end. I was just starting. I had no mortgage. I had no debts. I had no family drama waiting for me at the dinner table. I was untethered. It was a terrifying feeling, but it was also intoxicating. It was the feeling of a soldier who has finally put down his rifle and walked off the battlefield, leaving the war behind him. As the miles ticked by, the landscape changed. The pine trees of Georgia gave way to the rolling hills of Alabama. I drove with the window cracked, letting the wind whip through the cab. It smelled of earth and rain and asphalt. It smelled of possibility. I thought about Darius. He was sitting in a cell right now, probably staring at the wall, wondering how his life had imploded so spectacular. He was angry. He was hurt. But he was alive. And for the first time in his life, he was safe from his own worst instincts. I hadn't abandoned him. I had saved him. I had put him in a cocoon of consequences, hoping that in 5 years something stronger would emerge. People would say I was cruel. They would say a father should never turn his back on his child. They would say I should have used my millions to buy him the best lawyers, to buy him freedom, to buy him another chance to fail. But those people didn't understand the nature of rot. If you cut out the cancer but leave the root, it just grows back stronger. I had to burn the field to save the soil. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the black and white photo of Sarah. I propped it up on the dashboard right next to the GPS. "We are going west, Sarah," I whispered. "We are going to see the Grand Canyon. We are going to see the Pacific Ocean. We are going to see all the things we talked about when we were young and broke and happy." She smiled back at me from the photo, frozen in a moment of pure, unadulterated hope. She would have hated what I did to Darius. She would have cried, but she would have understood. She knew that sometimes love means doing the hard thing. She knew that you can't carry a grown man forever without breaking your own back. The road stretched out ahead, a gray ribbon cutting through the darkening world. I turned on the radio. Not the news, not the chatter, just the blues. A slow, mournful guitar filled the cab, matching the rhythm of the tires on the pavement. I was alone. The silence in the RV was absolute save for the music and the engine. There was no Amber scheming in the corner, no Jensen lurking in the shadows, no Darius begging for a handout. It was a solitude that felt heavy like a winter coat, but it kept the cold out. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was accompanied by my dignity. I was accompanied by the knowledge that I had stood my ground when the world tried to push me over. I had $10 million in the bank. But that wasn't my wealth. My wealth was the peace of mind that came from knowing I owed nothing to anyone. I had paid my dues. I had raised my son. I had buried my wife. I had built an empire, and I had dismantled it with my own hands. I was a free man. I passed a sign that said, "State line 5 miles." I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was empty. No one was following. No one was coming to drag me back to the nursing home. No one was coming to steal my gold. I lit a cigarette, the flame flaring bright in the dim cab. I took a drag and watched the smoke swirl out the window, disappearing into the slipstream. Reggie King, the trucking magnate, was gone. Reggie King, the victim, never existed. The man driving this bus was just a traveler, a ghost on the highway, and that was exactly who I wanted to be. I pressed the accelerator. The engine roared a deep, throaty growl of power. I drove into the sunset, into the night, into the rest of my life. I was free. Moral of the story. We often spend our lives building castles for our children, shielding them from the storms of reality. But in doing so, we sometimes cripple them, teaching them entitlement instead of resilience. True love isn't about giving endlessly. It's about knowing when to stop giving to save their souls. Betrayal from one's own blood is the deepest cut, but it is also the sharpest wake-up call. Dignity has no price tag, and sometimes you have to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing, even if that enemy shares your last name. Peace is the only wealth that matters in the end. We spend our lives building shelters for those we love, hoping to protect them from the rain. But sometimes that shelter becomes a cage of entitlement. I learned the hard way that true love isn't about enabling weakness. It's about forcing strength. When my own blood tried to bury me, I didn't just survive. I redefined what family means. Loyalty isn't inherited, it's earned. And dignity. That's the one asset you can never transfer. In the end, the most valuable thing I own isn't the millions in the bank, it's the peace of knowing I stood tall when it mattered most. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, do you think I was too hard on Darius, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I'll be reading your answers.